Okay, I think it's 6:03 and I'd love a roll call whenever you're ready. Stephanie, thank you.
Commissioner Dillard,
Here.
Commissioner Simmons,
Here.
Commissioner Krebs,
Here.
Commissioner Gathua,
Here.
Commissioner Merritt,
Here.
and Commissioner Nobis.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now we'll have the reading of the Native American Land Acknowledgement. Commissioner Gathua, thank you.
We meet today in the community of Iowa City, which now occupies the homelands of Native American nations to whom we owe our commitment and dedication. The area of Iowa City was within the homelands of the Iowa, Meskwaki, and Sioux. And because history is complex and time goes far back beyond memory, we also acknowledge the ancient connections of many other indigenous peoples here. The history of broken treaties and forced removal that dispossessed indigenous peoples of their homelands was and is an act of colonization and genocide that we cannot erase. We implore the Iowa City community to commit to understanding and addressing these injustices as we work towards equity, restoration, and reparations.
Thank you. Next, there are no passage agenda items to approve, Stephanie?
No.
Okay, we'll go on to public comment of items not on the agenda. For anyone in the room, if you'd like to speak on anything not on our agenda, please come up to the microphone, state your name, and let us know what you have to say. Welcome.
Hi. I have 5 minutes, so I have to read this. I apologize for my lack of eye contact. All right. My name is Kevin Perez. I live in Iowa City, and I've been here for 30 years. I am a graduate of the University of Iowa. I'm a third-generation Hispanic resident of the state of Iowa. I've been attempting to get on the agenda of this meeting for several months. My attorney made the initial request of Ms. Chastity Dillard in October of 2023. The city of Iowa City wrote my attorney on October 25th of 2023 that Ms. Chastity Dillard had responded that I cannot appear on the agenda because this is a direct quote attributed to Ms. Dillard by Elizabeth Craig, attorney for the city of Iowa City. I want to read the exact quote. She has asked us to convey that the commission is still working with her consultants to construct the infrastructure through which they will bear witness to the truth of a racial injustice in Iowa City and collect testimony, end quote. Last week, I saw part of your meeting in V. Fixmer Arias, who identifies as part of the LGBTQ and Filipino communities, was placed on the agenda and spoke and interacted with the board for about 40 minutes. It is clear to me that this organization can and did hear a grievance on January 25th of 2024. I will now get to my grievance. I operate a business called Schwartzberger and Shine at 18 South Clinton in Iowa City. I've been operating in this space since 2009. I originally leased the space from a man named Haywood Bell. Mr. Bell was a third-generation African-American business owner in Iowa City. When Haywood died in 2016, he left care of the building to a trust operated by Midwest One Bank. Since at least 2018, Midwest One Bank has allowed the building to deteriorate and is now being demolished by neglect, despite the fact that the building is part of the Iowa City Downtown District and qualifies to be on the National Register of Historic Places. What should be of interest to you is my ongoing campaign to save Mr. Haywood Bell's building at 1820 South Clinton. I operate a website. I encourage you to go to this website and read the history of the Short and Bell family and their 3 generations of ownership of this building. The website is www.historicshortsiowacity.com. I have been embroiled in a battle with both the bank and the city to try and get someone to save this building. In 2023, there were at least one federal grant of $24 million available for historic preservation of buildings significant to the African-American community. And the building on Clinton Street qualified for a portion of that money. I asked the bank, the city, and its Historic Preservation Commission all to help me submit a request for some of the grant money to fix the building, but none of them would even respond. The recording of history is an attempt to record the truth. This commission has the word truth in its title. There is no excuse for the bank or the city to try and alter the truth about Clinton Street and allow a piece of Iowa City history, a building that is the cornerstone of an African-American real estate portfolio, to risk demolition. The number of properties in this entire country that have been successfully passed down through 3 generations of African-American ownership is statistically less than 1%. H.D. Short, and I want to show you a picture of Mr. Short right now. That's him. Started with a shoe shine kit in a barber shop at 18 South Clinton in 1920. He ended up owning the building by the time of his death in 1947. Haywood still owned it when he died in 2016. This is a story of remarkable accomplishment for the African-American community in this city, this state, and this country. Haywood was a man of tremendous integrity and was proud of his building. Haywood does not have any children, so he left the care of the building to Midwest One Bank, believing the bank would be the proper steward for his life and family's work. Unfortunately, the bank is not following the wishes of Haywood stated during his life. Haywood understood that I am also a 3rd-generation Iowan. My grandfather came from Mexico to Iowa City in the 1910s to work on the railroad. Haywood and I worked well together and both have a desire to represent our ethnic communities authentically, even though we are no longer alive, even after we are no longer alive to control the narrative. In order to do that, the city must recognize the accomplishments of our ethnic groups. The building at 1820 South Clinton is a one-of-a-kind monument to a man and a family that achieved what millions of immigrants can only dream of: generational wealth building. I have thousands of pages of research and information that I have paid to compile about this property and its history. And I just want to ask any of you who understand why we need to get the word out about this before it's too late to email me at kphistoricshortsiowacity.com, or just stop by Shorts anytime. If I'm not there, ask my manager, Sam, to get me, and I will do everything I can to get there. I would like to see the African-American community in Iowa City get a landmark and also showcase 2 minority groups working together to advance the truth about our accomplishments, as Haywood and I did while he was alive, instead of letting the lawyers at the city continue to control how the world sees Iowa City. I think we need the full story, and when the city will not let me get on any of the agendas to talk about what's happening to the building, then no one knows the truth. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room that would like to speak on items not on the agenda tonight? All right, thank you very much. We're going to move forward on to the next agenda item, which is a report from our Native partners. So I'm going to invite, I believe, Annie and V to come talk about that.
Yeah. Annie, V Fix My Rise, SD Planning, one of the consultants for the TRC. So Annie had put together a report that she emailed out. And so I could just kind of go over the highlights. I also just put together a short presentation on the survey results from that. So we did do a survey to try and, make sure we're capturing some data and getting an understanding of how people are experiencing the circles. So you can kind of see in the report that Annie put together, and I touched a little bit of this on my presentation, but we did have, 3 days, and we had several people show up, 8 people the first day, the first evening, which was last Friday, and then another 8 people on Saturday, and then 9 people on Sunday. And there were 3, so we have 3 Native partners, Manape Lemaire, Terry Medina, and Danielle Wanati. And so they each kind of led their own healing circle, talking circle. And then actually on the 3rd day, there was sort of kind of a combining of, and I would call it more of like a checking in and talking about the experiences that people had the previous 2 days. There were several folks who had been there all 3 days. So that was really nice. That wasn't something that was required in any way. So I will kind of jump into the survey because I think it shows the responses that people had better than I can articulate it in this moment. Oh, I do need to share my screen though. That's possible.
I believe there's still technical difficulties.
Are you not able to see the screen?
They can, I believe they can see it on Zoom. The problem is here in the room, and I'm working with them to try to get that resolved.
Okay.
But as long as you can see it on yours.
I don't see anything on Zoom.
Oh, you can't. Okay.
Oh, now I do. Now I do.
I don't think she could hear you. Try that again. Sorry.
Okay. I'm gonna
Alice, what can you see on your screen?
let me try and
I did see the presentation that had disappeared just
Okay.
now. Oh, it's back.
sorry, yeah. I stopped it. Sorry. I know, technical difficulties. Can you see it now? So
It says you're screen sharing, but it's still black.
Zoom really hates us right now. Okay,
And
let
then
me
it
try.
disappeared. Like it was on there.
Yeah, it's stopped. Okay, let's try this one more time.
You might be like clicking. You might have to click like on an actual. Yeah, there you go. I see
Okay,
it now.
Yeah. Okay, well, I know folks in the room can't see it, so I'll just I'll spare you the pie charts. So like I said, we had 3 days. The location was the East Side Recycling Center out in Iowa City, which was nice. It's very open, but there were some, the fact that it was kind of on the edge of Iowa City. We did offer transportation. We offered childcare. Nobody took us up on that. But I think, there are always barriers, and I'm assuming that those could potentially be some of them for folks that didn't make it. So survey results, we wanted to know who was in the room. So one of the questions was this your first time experiencing healing circles? And 3/4 of the people that took the survey, which was about 3/4 of the people that attended, said yes. In fact, it was the first time that they had ever experienced something like this. And then we asked a question, how did you feel when you arrived at the event? People said hopeful, ready to take in the content, nervous, skeptical, anxious, open and curious, excited for a new experience, unsure of what to expect, a bit confused about who it was for, curious about how it would go, ready to engage with others during a group experience. That was just one person. So they were kind of experiencing a lot of things. Felt a little disorganized, but fine. Then we skipped one. And then how did you feel after the event? So I felt that listening to others was the most important takeaway. Calm, thoughtful, and grateful. Glad I participated. Connected, raw, and changed. Calm. I appreciated meeting new people and also having the opportunity to remember the loved ones, living and dead, that play in my well-being. More connected, more ready to hold space, supported and connected to others who were there and others in the community, and enlightened. So you can see the vast difference when people were going in feeling nervous and anxious and disorganized, and then coming out feeling that connected, the holding of the space and connected to others in the community. And then the question we asked was, would you attend another TRC sponsored Healing Talking Circle event? And all of them were on the range of, yes, I would show up every time. So it was the Likert scale was, no, I don't enjoy this experience, all the way to, yes, I would show up every time. And everybody was on the tail of, I would show up every time. So that's fantastic. And then, are you interested in learning more? Everybody said yes. And then there were some comments. Yes, since there was a lot of similarity between my African healing talking ways with that of American Indigenous peoples. And then there was certainly, the other comment was, there was certainly more to experience and to pay attention to as well. So I think that does speak to the experience of the circles being, there's a lot of information that is shared, not even just interpersonally, but also culturally. As you can see, that there was some similarities there that were experienced and a lot of information. So also fantastic. We also wanted to know some of the demographics. So we had anywhere from about mid-20s. That person didn't fill out the survey, but I know this person and she was there. So she's recently graduated, so I know she's in her mid-20s. And then we had one person in their 30s, a couple of people. We had four people in their 5 people in their 40s, and then one person in their late 60s that filled out the survey. And then ethnicity wise, Asian American, Caucasian, European American, Latino, white, Hispanic, Latine. So some range, but also no Black people of color. No, I mean, in terms of immigrants, we have some representation. Like we can always do more, right? But this at least gives us a baseline of this experience. And then in terms of gender, pretty much everybody identified as male or cisgendered male or female. We had 2 men, and then we had 5 women fill out the survey. This, I think, really gets to the heart of it. And these are just a few that I can share. But when asked to summarize their experience, here's what some people said. And this is one quote. "I thought this would be hokey. Instead, it was spiritual. I felt connected to all the people there, even though I didn't know most of them. And I think we came from very different religious and cultural backgrounds. I was afraid to open up, but seeing others be so vulnerable and real made it feel safer. The people leading talked about cleansing tears. I felt that. We all cried together. Some was release, some was sadness. By the end, it was gratitude as well." End quote. Another one is listening to the stories of our circle lead and hearing some humor, hearing the reasons people attended and learning about where they are from. I tried to keep all this in mind when thinking about how this could all help gun violence survivors. Another quote is, "This experience is not easily summarized as it caused a kind of seismic shift in my sense of connection, awareness, and humility. It was an unexpected confronting and connecting to oneself, the other members of the circle, and everything, everyone, everywhere." And then another one just said humbling. So really powerful takeaways from the experience. And then we do have some upcoming talking circles happening. So the Saturday, February 10th and Saturday, February 17th, we are super fortunate to have the Right House of Fashion in our community. So Saturday, February 10th from 1 to 4, we'll be hosting a talking circle there at the Right House of Fashion. Really excited about that. And then we're also hosting another one on Saturday, February 17th from 1 to 4 in the South District. And we're still trying to just pin down where exactly that's going to be, but we know that that's a good place for connecting and community. And so maybe the I-Corps gym, maybe somewhere like that. Yeah, so that was the 10th and the 17th, both at 1 to 4. Oh, it is up. Sweet.
Okay.
It happened. You can see like my awesome, like right here. Anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions. I just wanted to it's a very short survey. We wanted to make it pretty accessible for folks. So, but happy to go through any of this. And we took a few pictures, but not many.
Yeah, thank you all for, doing this, taking the lead as we've asked you to do. So thank you so much. My question is, what do you need from us as a commission? What do you think is missing? How can we work together to make sure that the next ones are showing, especially demographically, as we'd want?
Yeah, I think sharing the information out, absolutely, and attending. I think that one, a powerful aspect of this is that, as we're doing the experiences, you're able to connect our community members as well. I mean, we don't know if any of the commissioners who were there want to speak to that experience, but I think attending would be great because it's TRC sponsored, and then people get to see who you are, also for the experience itself, but definitely helping us share it. It would be very, very helpful. We've tried to get the word out in our, kind of channels, but and city channels, but we know that only goes so far. So I will have a flyer ready by tomorrow. We're just trying to finalize some of the details and paperwork. So, but we should be good to go. I can get that out to Stephanie so she can send it to you.
I wasn't able to make last weekend, but if any of us were able to and want to just share what they felt about this experience, I'd love to hear it.
I did attend the Friday one, but I'd say for Saturday and Sunday, I was too exhausted from the week before to make those ones. And you didn't ask on the survey on the question of the food. Yeah, it was good. It was, to me, very healthy. And I'm glad, Annie, we have a repeat of that. So that's my answer to that question. I'm the type of student whom, if a question is not on the teacher's questions, I add my own and answer and expect credit. Yeah, so that's what I would add. And you're talking about getting the information out. And this is always a challenge to me, how the city gets out information. One, I did share on my social media, but I project the pain I feel trying to get to the info, even this particular flyer, instead of the flyer just being right there, like that picture that's there. If you go to my page, what you see is the Iowa City logo. And a lot of the people, and I mean, it's the whole world when something is on. I'm like, if the picture was right there, especially the word healing, and this is me projecting on others that I know, it's more capturing than just the logo of the city of Iowa City. I'm sorry, my city. Yeah, but in this particular time, the healing word needed to be at the forefront.
It's good for you.
And the flyer is really good and the color. So and I know this is something we've struggled with, even others who are tech savvy, who are like, can I do that? No, you can't. You've got to do it this way. So just making it really get to it, not to really have to go through. And even getting to our city website, you really have to struggle even getting to my meeting and my agenda. So, and I'm supposedly tech savvy. What about somebody who, yeah. So, and then also, not just that, how about getting that information to where the people we are trying to have attend are going to get it? Because we already know the usual ways we communicate they don't work. For example, I don't want to talk for a group, but if I'm wanting to get to the African immigrants, right now, if I want something out in the next hour, I want maybe 100 people there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get my son there, Rugo. I tell him, can you talk to your friends? Then I'm going to talk to Mr. Amos over there. So that way. And so just trying to be sensitive. Whom are you reaching? Where are these people? How do I get them? I've just seen in the course of that, we've said holding a circle in the South District. We are getting there. So looking for people and where they are and not assume that where I am and the ways that work for me are the ones that work for the next person. So we are going to, and as I talk, I'm also talking to myself to do these things that I'm talking about. But then there is also the flip side. I liked that, for example, on Friday, we were 8. So the community members. So we were really able to interact. And then even the circle, we go deeper because we were less. So if we get more numbers, then there's that challenge. How do we go? Because I'm learning and I've barely even learned a lot about Indigenous people's circles. How big can a circle be? But but I do run counseling groups, and the scientific number, you don't really want it to go more than 12. So yeah, so there's getting a lot of people, then that also means, and even as the facilitators are doing it, more than that is also a lot. So those are some of the things to think about. But I did love that on Friday and the other circles that have been, including sometime back, one ran by Annie and Angie and Manape. The numbers were within recommended numbers, and they worked very well. The other thing and this is maybe just me, really, I'm thinking it would be good for our facilitators to, as we get into the healing circles, and maybe it was done and I missed it, or it has been done, connect it to the TRC work. And also at some point, just have, how does it work with TRCs? And also with oppression healing, how does that work? Maybe people already know, or maybe, but just let us hear it. And the why question. And I'm also going to connect this with, as we go to the week of March 18, whether it works, how does it work individually? Because somebody may be triggered and they are alone. So how do we do our healing? What do we do with that? Or how does it go? And probably this is me asking because I do not know that in the, what is called traditional, which is Western, usually what we do is, if we notice, we work with that person one-on-one. But in the healing circles, how is that going to work? And I will stop. You can see I had a lot, and your survey wasn't going to capture, wasn't intended for all that.
Yeah.
And
But thank you.
Yeah, I yield.
I will definitely take that feedback back to the team.
So Wangui, question, are you saying that like, as you were doing the circles, the healing circle, that you didn't like feel like there was a concept that this was for racial issues? That wasn't specifically explained, or we could dive a little bit more into that?
I just wondered whether, for me as a commissioner and as I've been doing, I know therefore they are part of the TRC work and they fit in reconciliation, but even for myself, and even as I use the word reconciliation, it's not really reconciliation, because reconciliation is, there was some relationship, it was broken, and now it's being brought back. But in this case, what's there? So I guess some clarity, but I can also do some homework and for myself find out how healing circles work with racism.
I would love to jump in there too, if I can, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what Wangui is saying is very legitimate. And it's a concern that I've had myself. I have been concerned about like the process from beginning to end with this work that the facilitators have put together. I feel like it has been like kind of put together like it's not flowing the way like I kind of imagined it would go. Not saying that what I imagined is the way it should be. I'm just giving you my perspective. So I'm not trying to say that what's being done is wrong. I'm just saying that from my experience or like from my worldview, like I always imagined that these circles would happen like in conjunction with like truth telling, testimony events, and or afterwards. They're a part of healing and places for people to get together and share stories and kind of get to the, so that when you're in these spaces, like the truth and reconciliation is really part of it because it happens like, right around the truth telling or within it, or like, it's part of the whole thing. I've just been very confused as to like these strategic doings and getting like, input from mostly white folks and, people with, like status. And, I like, honestly, like I said, when I thought of these circles initially, like I thought they would just be part like of our community events that we'd be hosting. I imagined a lot more testimony going on so that we would be hearing like the actual voices of people in our communities. And so these circles would be a part of that whole process and part of the healing part of it as well, because I know that healing is not in the term truth and reconciliation, but like I definitely feel like healing is like a huge aspect of that, right? And like by the sounds of it, like these circles are exceedingly successful in the way that they're being done right now. And the fact that they're being run by Indigenous peoples is paramount because it's not like we have a place in very many spaces. So allowing Indigenous people this one part of the truth and reconciliation process is fantastic. And then I also wanted to note, just because you're asking for people to provide input about these circles, I couldn't make it because my daughter had COVID and now I have COVID. And also I couldn't imagine being at 14 hours of this over the weekend. Like I know that we could just go to one, but even that just seems like a lot to ask right these days for myself anyways. And also because I trust the Native people that I helped put into these spaces to do a great job. So I guess what bothers me is like the fact that these circles were put way out on the perimeter of the city. I mean, you can't go any further and like be in Iowa City basically. So they're very much out of the way. And there was like very little advertising done. And I guess those are the constraints we have by the city, perhaps. And then, we can pay these facilitators a lot of money, like Kearns and West and whoever, to do this work and to fly in and to pay all this money for them to do these things, but we can't pay like for a nice space downtown. Like I just get confused sometimes as to like what the money is being spent on because I don't feel like it's being spent in the way it should be. So I kind of just gave up a lot here. But I am very happy with the outcome of the circles. But yes, it would be nice if the circles were more a part of actual testimony, or a place that people could go afterwards, and then that where people could heal, and come to terms with things regarding testimony. So thank you.
I'll still follow you. I'll follow up that, Commissioner Nobis. Usually, how are they done, healing circles in relation to racism? I know you said about that they go together with truth telling.
I mean, I'm not saying usually how they're done. I don't think there's a usual way that they're done. Like healing circles for Indigenous peoples are used in a variety of contexts. But I was imagining here, because they're called healing circles or talking circles, that they would be used in the context of healing and reconciliation. Right. So but before you do that, you need to have some truth telling. You need to have testimony. So you need to have people have an ability to get that testimony out there, and to talk about like what the issues are, and then provide a space for people to get together and reconcile and heal. And so that's what I think is missing, is like they're just kind of randomly out there right now, out of context, is what my opinion is. They're very, very successful, but they're like out of context and they're random, and they're not accessible to a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you. So if what I'm hearing is, if it comes on the heels of a truth telling like we'll do in March, then the content in the circle will be coming out of that.
Yeah, and we can specifically ask our healers, like our facilitators, our native facilitators, if they please provide a prompt for folks to speak about these things if that's what they want. Also, the actual act of the circles bringing community together is sort of doing that job already. But yeah, if it's on the heels of an actual truth-telling event, that definitely is what I would imagine the circles being more efficient or like more effective, I guess, in terms of the work that we're trying to carry out. So yes, what you said is correct.
Yeah, thank you for answering my question when I was saying the connection. Thank you for answering that. And you've taken me back to another circle that we did. It wasn't, there were actually two, but they didn't feel to me, and they were not disconnected because there was context. And it answers my question to the ones that we just got done here, why they're not in context. But then I remind myself that they were training. So I guess that is why I was saying they should be explained what's going on. I guess for myself, I also forgot as a community member that like the Friday one was experiential, and there is also training going on. Thank you, Commissioner Nobis.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Dillard. I was really asking initially because I think we've all heard from Commissioner Novus and Gathua that it is very, very important that people know why we're doing this. And if it's disconnected in the community, while I know that there's lots of different ways to do healing circles, it's not what we're tasked to do. So in my opinion, I think we should find a way to make sure that that is clear. And if it is, I don't know what the right word is, weird to do these one-offs, I guess we have to emphasize that a little bit more. Yeah, just thoughts.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the feedback. I guess I would say these initial circles experiences were really to bring the experience to the community so that people, when the first time they experienced them, weren't in a trauma response. And they may very well be, but the opportunity for our Native partners to come and be in the community also was very helpful to them, was what I heard, was that they were, they learned a lot about our community too, so that when we do the truth-telling events, that they will be more prepared. I think the reason why we're doing the healing, the talking circle experiences ahead of that, culminating events where we have like the truth telling and the healing circles together is also to see if there are other people in the community that want to do more types of work like this, so that we can expand the ability of our community to maybe not host these exact ones, because I understand that, you know, there are of course very powerful like native medicines that come through, but that maybe expose people and to opening up to these types of experiences ahead of the truth-telling experiences. And that way we kind of expand our ability as a community to hold those types of spaces, have those kinds of conversations, feel that connection. So I guess that was the thinking behind it from the Native partners and our healing team, was that just to get people used to it, but also for Manape T and Danielle to understand our community a little bit better. And in terms of the TRC connection, I couldn't attend Friday night, but I was there Saturday and Sunday, and both times the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had come up and the ideas of reconciliation were discussed. But I did write down to make sure that we flesh out a little bit more how we want that connection. And so we'll probably just come back with some suggestions or thoughts or questions really as to what that could look like. Because we definitely want that to be very clear. These were just the first ones. It's almost like you kind of want to do some to sort of figure out, how is this going to run? What's it going to look like? And I agree 100%. Having it at the Eastside Recycling Center was not ideal. We did get some folks there, but I'm very much so looking forward to having these, you know, the Right House of Fashion and in the South District. And if we can get some in other areas, Pheasant Ridge, places like that, then it's just, we're just starting. So, but all of this is really good feedback. I really appreciate it. And I've
Yeah,
taken lots
and
of notes.
for me, the clarification, it's not really for us who are the commissioners and who've been engaging with this. It's more to the community.
Yeah.
Yeah, that especially I think this is the first time we are bringing, we brought community members to the experiencing circles.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was asking myself, it looks like we should have done some explanation or let people know and connect and really, yeah, I do know that we introduced ourselves. Yeah, but then it was like, okay, these are commissioners, this TRC. And then
So,
we are
oh,
talking.
sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and about Friday.
Like
Yeah.
teeing it up. I
like,
think
yeah.
that, I wrote that down. We need to have a stronger
yeah.
connection for sure.
So
Commissioner-
are the things we're doing right now then they're just like for fun? I mean, I'm not trying to say like, I mean, I'm trying to say like they're just to see. I'm so confused. I don't know what is going on here.
No, I mean, for fun, I think I would say that they are definitely.
I didn't mean to use the word for fun. I couldn't think of the word because I have COVID. So like
No,
look for to see, like if it's, I mean, that seems like a lot of money to spend on something like that. I mean, I'm glad we're spending the money on particularly Native partners, paying them to come here and do that work, right? But what I'm saying is like, I don't I guess I don't understand all these phases and these like in bureaucracy in a way. Like, I mean, why aren't we just having like events out? Like we could have been having events with our communities now for months and months. Like, why can't we just be doing that? And then, having the circles be a part of these things. What are we trying to achieve? Like, what are we trying to achieve by the end of your guys's term with us?
So I think from the healing circles and then the talking circles perspective, it's really to engage with community members in this fashion to provide that platform, and that process and holding those spaces are very different than, one-on-one conversations or hosting events. Like, it's just another tool to have in our community. And I think that we've tried to be as thoughtful as possible in terms of how those are run. So, making sure that we have the Native representation to lead that has been paramount, and wanting them to dictate what that looks like. And so I know that Manape, Danielle also, there's just some complications with getting some folks on tonight. But I think that the purpose of this is to really bring these types of spaces into our community so that we can have things like, the truth and the truth telling that happens and have the circles. But even beyond that, in fact, when I was talking to Andre Wright today, he was like, wouldn't it be amazing if we just had like 4 or 6 times a year where people just knew that this was going to happen, and so they could just come. So it's really about,
I mean, that's the kind of thing that we've been trying to build already as the commission. Like, so yes, yeah,
is what I'm saying. And so we're just starting, and that's okay. I mean, we're just learning to get this off the ground. And so I guess that's my answer.
This Commissioner Merritt here. One thing I wanted to talk about is that if you also looking back at what contractually, like the phase 1, phase 2, and granted at the end of phase 1, we only had, I think, one meeting that even talked about like the healing circles and whatever. And ultimately, we are, to provide recommendations to the city. And one of the things, and we talked about this briefly the last meeting, that it's pretty clear as we were scheduling for the culminating week, whatever, that people are going to be doing truth telling. They're going to be needing like some of those healing circles because of the trauma and working that in conjunction. So that is something that is going to be part of the recommendation at the end when we do this. And so, granted, I cannot attend these particular events you just had, but I've had experience with them in previous jobs and that kind of stuff. So I kind of knew the expectation, but like I said, these were examples that provided to the community of what they look like. And you got some feedback from the people who attended and basically being able to incorporate that into, like I said, what the recommendation is. And if somebody talked about having several of these throughout the year, that's part of the recommendation that we can provide, that these are the kind of healing circles that we can have in conjunction with the truth telling events. And these are just, it might seem like it's random because that's just kind of how our schedule with this phase 2 ramping up and everything is, but it's given an example of what we're going to be able to put into the final report. And also, like I said, giving some experience to the community. And yes, we need to do better about communicating with our community and getting things up. But unfortunately, this was also under very short notice, with the scheduling. But
Okay, so I think I understand now. So all of this is being done so we can provide examples for the city so that we can move forward and like ask for more funding to do these things that we think are going to work like long term or like over the next 6 months, like after the facilitators are done.
I mean, I would say yes and no. I mean, we, for as far as our hiring of the facilitators, we said we wanted to learn in the first phase what it means to run a traditional TRC, and we were shown different ways and asked to have different aspects. And then in the second phase, I would like to say testing. I used the word pilot before. I know that's not the greatest word, but we're trying to just perfect the process. And I feel like right now we're process making, so that we keep saying culminating event, but I know that it's not culminating. It's really our first time out to showcase how our process could look in conjunction with the community, get their feedback. And so I think everything that we have done has just been a test. If, for instance, strategic,
It's an expensive test.
Others, and some loved it. Some loved it more than others. Some loved it a lot. I'm sorry, Commissioner, Novus, did you say something?
I said that's an expensive test.
What's an expensive test?
I mean, how much money did we pay the facilitators?
We're paying the facilitators, I don't know, about $400,000. But without the facilitators, we learned from the city we could not do any of the work that we're doing now. This is how we got here.
That's not the way I understood it initially. But okay. I thought the facilitators were actually supposed to help us get our report written and like help us do these events. Like, so like I don't feel like we're getting much for this amount of money. So yeah, but I'm gonna stop talking now. But I'm just I want it on record that I'm quite disappointed. I'm not disappointed with the circles. I'm happy with those, but I'm disappointed with how much money we're spending to test some stuff out when this could be used to actually be facilitating like a lot of events within our communities, like grassroots, like on the ground with food, and just getting straight up testimony from our people.
Okay, thank you for putting that on the record.
Yeah, and I'm thinking Commissioner Nobis, when I saw Commissioner Dillard look at me when she mentioned the word pilot, because I was struggling with that, but I've been taken back to, I remember from the very beginning, one of the things that we have repeated many times is a recommendation at the end. We would want to recommend for the commission to continue. So then putting back, because I'm kind of thinking some of it is a matter of semantics and use of words, test, pilot, but V has talked of starting, because we are, and this I'm comparing with all the other TRCs and racism task forces that have been there. And I'm especially thinking of Greensboro. They were long. So V has just used the word start. So starting, and because people here who have that experience is people like Dr. Skula, and then we have some of the facilitator team, David and Gonzalez. The rest of us are starting. So whichever word we pick, piloting, starting, and then continuing with the work. And even for them, they are starting in Iowa City. It's new because each of those TRCs and those places, they are unique in their own ways. So, when I got my fellow commissioners and some community members, like Em was explaining, because especially the word piloting and testing seemed to creep in on November. It came in November.
Yeah,
9th.
that's not something I heard of because I've been on this for 2.5 years and I'm seeing something completely different from what we had initially imagined. And I just want to say one last thing, sorry, that from my experience with the TRC in Canada and what my relatives have talked to me about and social workers and, Indigenous peoples, in the end, ridiculous amounts of money went to facilitators, to therapists, to lawyers, to all these people, and the money didn't actually get to where it should be going to, because you always have to have those people taking their cut and like coming in, and like I'm just not happy with like how this is turning out. If this is if this is just a test or a pilot, like this should be like the actual work. So I'm just that's why I keep saying I'm confused. I'm like I said again, I'm happy with these healing circles and how they're going, but they're being done out of context. And if they're just a test, well, that makes no sense. And where's the testimony? And it just none of this is how I imagined it unfolding. Again, okay, I'm gonna just follow Gathua and say I yield.
I did want to make one comment because I understand having the talking circles and healing circles after testimony is super important. I also want to respect and bring in the people that were there during those circles, that there was testimony and sharing and healing happening in those circles too. And to just not discount that, because I think that while it seems really small scale, I did have somebody when they were leaving say that they wanted to be, that they felt like this was a drop and they wanted to be part of the ripple. And I thought that was like a really good analogy for, we think these things are too small in scale. And I think that it shouldn't be underestimated, the power of these types of smaller gatherings as well. Not to say that the big gatherings aren't great. And, of course, we'll be there for the truth telling. That's very important. But also just want to add that there is some value in community building that does happen. And I know we can, probably agree on that. It just may not be to the scale that people are thinking of, but just having been there for those couple of days, I feel like there was some really incredible things that were happening within those spaces. And I just wanted to bring that forth too, to not lose that part of it.
I know that we have some other agenda items to move on, but I do want to say, like, I know the word testing and pilot's not correct because is not right, because we are doing the work with all of these instances. In my opinion, like this is part of us doing the work right. How can we know what to do if we don't try something? And that's how I view it. But I do hear you, Sakawas, Commissioner Novus, that this is not how you imagine it, that you're not happy. And I'd love to just talk more about that and how we can all work together, like to make sure that every commissioner is seeing this the way they want to see it. Because we're supposed to be working on this as a team. So I just want to say I hear you.
Thank you.
I want to piggyback on V's last remark about the weekend did bring 25 community members, and if you do events in the community, we know it's really difficult to get community members to really come and stay for really long events that are really deep. So, not to forget to count the small successes. And we are beginning. And I said I wasn't there on Saturday and Sunday, but on Friday, one community member did say that she is very happy because that is part of what wanting to be connecting with other community members. So we cannot discount that. And also, others also said learning even about other, because we have many cultures in our city. So even when we do get an opportunity to learn about the ways of other people. So yeah, it's not, I won't discount that, bringing out and getting 25 members of the community in a sitting and sitting through for very many hours and sitting very deeply.
Okay, if there's no other comment, I'd love to encourage all of us to make sure that we're putting it out on our own personal media, sending out emails, texts, talking to people in person, social media, so that we can make sure that these next two events get the best group of people that we want to experience this.
That's here. So I was confused kind of on what it was. I was confused about what the Healing Circle would be about. I thought it would be like more tailored to racial issues. So I kind of invited people along those lines. And if I'd known it was like more open in general, I probably would have been like included more. I would have changed who I was inviting or added more people, or, you know, it would have affected who I was inviting. Because I know there's some people who really need some healing, but I thought it would be like racially
I can't tell which one.
racial subject matter. So when we do these next two, will they be similar or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think that the Manape and Danielle and T on Sunday had kind of come to we're sort of asking like what is the best kind of configuration of what they've been doing, because it was kind of every day was a little bit different. And I will bring that question to them because they're the ones that are really running it. And I guess the question I would have is, you know, obviously I've written down, you know, having more of a connection to the TRC and reconciliation and race. And, you know, I'll definitely add that. But I think they're still trying to understand how to run these in a way that is reflective of what you all want and also honoring like the traditions that they're steeped in. Because there's, you know, usually rounds of questions. And I think that's probably where they were headed.
And I think we could very easily tailor it to more of you know, to a certain subject matter by, you know, asking the questions with that subject matter and, you know, in the front. So the other thing I was thinking about is how do we tailor these to the larger community without appropriating Native circles? How are we gonna make this? So I've been thinking actually of lots of things in my head on how we can do that. Or, you know, were they just going to keep doing this forever? So that was my other.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's one we still continue to ask. I think at this point, you know, they are very much so interested in running as many as the city wants them to run in forever, I guess. I don't know when to say forever and ever, but like, I think that they could see themselves having a role. I can't really answer the other part in terms of like how to expand that, because I feel like that's really in their purview. I know they've expressed bridge building and trying to extend, you know, what would that look like? But my sense on Sunday was that I'm not sure if they've landed on what that is, but I know that there's a desire. But especially if you have ideas, I mean, I think that there's definitely a desire. I know that they said it many times, but just how logistically do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of do, I don't know if I want to say test run, but it's good to kind of feel it out because we definitely want, when we're dealing with the healing component of this, we do want to come with something that's been thought out. We don't want to just throw some stuff at people who have been harmed and are experiencing trauma. So I think now that I'm thinking in that way, I'm like, okay, I can see why we would want to kind of check this out and make sure this is solid. Not that I don't trust the named partner.
Yeah.
But we want to have something solid for our community members. I was there on Sunday and I did get to experience how it was really powerful for the people in our community to experience. So it was great.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there any other comments? Okay.
I know, right, right. And then there were more comments. I just want to respond to a couple of things. One thing, Marie, is that tomorrow there'll be a beginning of the Native partners being able to talk with Eduardo and maybe Dave at a Zoom meeting about how to have the circles come after the truth telling. You know, what is their experience? That's new for them too. So we're kind of creating something that doesn't exactly exist yet, but we have access to people who have experienced the truth telling and different kinds of reconciliation processes. So just to let you know, that's happening. And another idea is, I think it really makes, I really appreciate you saying that there should be something said at the beginning about the work of the TRC. And it makes me wonder if there would always be one of you there to kind of welcome people to the circle and the people there and let them know the context and then kind of hand it off to the Native partners. That's one thing I'm thinking of, but I think that just as I'm riffing on that idea. So anyway, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm curious to hear Commissioner Lou's thoughts on Lou, we are talking about the circles that happened over the weekend, and you attended the Friday one with me, and I've given my take. That's what we've been doing so far since, and you did too. You did Friday and Sunday. So
Sunday. You have to give him your mic.
So yeah, I did attend Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
You might need to get a little closer to the mic.
Sorry, I did attend Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and got to experience the differences in the way they were presented and held. I never felt excluded. I never felt like anyone there felt like they couldn't talk or express. I thought they did a really good job of making it clear that this was a safe space. And I think, I forget who mentioned this, but someone said in some ways, calling it talking or healing is a bit of a misnomer. It's more a listening circle. It's really about having to sit there, be quiet, and listen to somebody else's discussion, feelings, beliefs, and then move on, so that we all were sort of learning from that. I did have this some similar feelings that Marie was getting at, that we never experienced how a conflict would be handled in a circle. And the Native partners agreed that that's something that usually doesn't happen. But I would anticipate it happening at some point if we're going to have a number of these things. So that's the only thing I'm a little bit not really concerned about. I think it'll all be handled well, but it's because I don't see how the structure or the protocols that are embedded in the circle explicitly deal with that kind of conflict, direct head-to-head conflict, except for saying, okay, well, you need to leave the circle. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the best way to do it. I don't know, but that's the only piece that I felt a slight tingle of concern about. Overall, I thought that it really went well. And I thought there was a reasonably diverse group of people there in terms of their beliefs and opinions.
We've had conflict in circle. Wangui, weren't you there?
Yeah, I was there too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, we've seen, oh, Cliff was, oh, Cliff, you're there, yeah. No, we've had conflict. It's the up to the facilitator to deal with that. And I feel like it was dealt with well, but that's just my opinion. Other people can chime in.
Yeah, we have, and it did, and it had been said at the beginning that that one, those ones were the other circles. There's one ran by Annie, then by Manape. And those ones, the context that we're talking about, they were given, and at the very beginning were told, it may not end the way you were thinking, but conflict did really happen. And yeah, and it has also led me to try and think back when we're talking and looking at all those other TRCs, what they do with conflict, because we were prepared that it does happen. Yeah.
Commissioner Krebs here. I just want to kind of point out too.
Do you want to put the mic closer to you?
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out, like, I mean, it's great. And I think, you know, we should hope for everything to go well and for everyone to kind of, you know, connect and have this feel good moment, or at least feel peaceful, or, you know, something, right? We want all these good things, but there are going to be times where it's not going to happen. There's going to be conflict. People are going to be mad. They're going to leave and they're going to just be mad. And that's their business. Like they can be mad. And, you know, as long as we've done our best, people are going to feel how they feel sometimes.
And TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation, it's about racism. And the Iowa City ad hoc TRC came to Iowa City via George Floyd's death. So, and racism itself, it's violence, it's negative. So I never thought, and I do not think, healing circles or truth-telling or fact-finding or reconciliation is kumbaya. So, and if we forget for a minute or we don't know, we keep reminding ourselves that it's something that we have in our city, and historically I've been here for a minute. We've really moved far. We are actually sitting here today because we are facing that. Easy? Of course not. I can speak for a lot of us here because we've said it. It's not easy. Difficult? Of course not. But making it better? Yes. So, no, it is not. And if it ends up being kumbaya, let's all hold hands. We are all friends today, best friends forever. We are not doing our work.
Thank you, Wangui. If there's no one else, I'd like to move to public comments on this agenda item. If there's anyone actually online that would like to comment on this agenda item specifically, please raise your hand in the chat. And if there's anyone in the room, please come to the microphone. I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, which is legislative update from our Deputy City Manager.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to actually ask the Chair and the Commission if it might be better for me to come back and do it another time, because I'm cognizant that you get me free, but we have our consultant here on a limited time that I think it's been, stated earlier that you're making a pretty good investment in. So I can certainly, if it's okay with the Commission, reschedule.
Okay. If everyone's okay with that, thank you very much.
Yep.
All right. The next one is updates for phase 2. I'm not sure if there's anything that needed to be touched on that. Okay. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Larry. Thank you.
Well, good evening. That wasn't rhetorical. Good evening.
Hello.
You know, I was sitting here thinking how lucky I feel. And I want to tell you why. First of all, I was lucky enough to enjoy Sugar Peach for lunch. Not him. I didn't eat Sugar Peach. I ate at his restaurant.
Oh my gosh.
I'm also lucky for reasons that I think are pretty obvious. I'm married to the love of my life. I have wonderful children. I'm also lucky that I get to do this work with you all. And I'm lucky that you're all here. We have perfect attendance tonight, which makes me feel very fortunate. But I'm also lucky because to a degree, the part of this work that I'm most intimately associated with, the fact finding, is underway. And I get to facilitate about that with you now. So the conversation that we've just been having around preparing for and getting ready for some experiences that are going to happen in March, this leg of the stool, so to speak, the fact-finding leg, we're in it now. That's what tonight's going to be. So that's a fortunate thing. It was just happenstance, I think, that I got the straw that was fact-finding. And that doesn't mean that it will be straightforward or easy, but it means that we're not rehearsing anything. We're starting now. So with great respect for all of the work that happened over last weekend, here we are tonight to kind of dive a little bit more deeply into this critical aspect of your work. So thanks to V and Annie and the Native partners for incredible work on the reconciliation leg. I know truth-telling will be coming relatively soon as well. And here we go with fact-finding. So let me lay out a quick agenda for what I intend to cover with you tonight, very mindful of the hour. I just realized I need to share my screen. Commissioner Novus, can you see the slide?
Yes.
I want to wish Commissioner Novus a speedy and complete recovery, and also for your, I think she said daughter. Did she say daughter that has? Commissioner Novus, hope there's full and complete healing in your home.
Thank you.
Okay, so I want to share with you what I was thinking about for tonight, and then ask if you'd like to shift things at all. We're going to, for the public's and your benefit, go through some preliminary information that our team has worked to assemble on the topic specifically of public safety. In regards to that information, we want to facilitate a discussion amongst you all about the kinds of conclusions, if any, that you think you can draw from the data we've found so far, what questions you have about that data, and probably most importantly, what else do you want us to look for on this topic in the spirit of fact-finding. So that's what I'm anticipating for our work. I'm just wondering if that is okay with folks, if that feels like a good agenda. Anybody want to make any amendments or anything?
Sounds good.
Okay. I wanted to just remind folks of the pre-existing discussion agreements. They are extensive and lengthy, so I'm not going to read them all verbatim as we have before, but certainly want to hear from everyone, want to encourage folks to learn from one another, want people to use inclusive and non-gendered language in people's pronouns, trust in each other and know that we move at the speed of trust, and honor what others say with discretion and integrity. These were the considerations that I talked with you about at the very beginning of the fact-finding process back, I want to say in September when I was here. And it may seem a little bit intuitive in a way, but I think it's really important, especially in the age that we live in, where so many people question what others consider factual, to think about what fact-finding means to us, what makes something factual, what standards should this particular TRC use to identify something as fact, and how should we define the facts that need to be found to fulfill your standards. So those are, before I move on, those are some of the questions I encourage you to ask as you receive this data. You know, what makes something a fact that should be enshrined in the TRC's recommendations? What should be a fact that is a hypothesis and tested against what the truth may be told to you about that topic, and so on and so forth. These were the key questions that we wanted to start asking ourselves when we first began this work. And when it came to topics, we came up with, as a group, I think about 7 or 8. And we decided as part of this planning process that it would be most appropriate in terms of how much time we have to focus for tonight and our session in March on one topic, that being public safety. But there are several others that are of interest to you all that I think are important to your mission and to your charter. And so it'll be important for you to think through how you might want to go about this work after we finish with the first one. We need to think about the sources of information, depictions of that information, and context. And hopefully that will all come through as I continue with this conversation. These were some of the topics that emerged as we were discussing them with you all in September. And as I mentioned tonight, we're going to focus primarily on public safety. The first thing that we wanted to share with you is something that doesn't directly relate to race or to racial inequity or discrimination, but I and our team found this to be interesting. This is a table that is drawn directly from federal data. This source of this particular table is an organization known as defundpolice.org. So it is important to consider the source. The name of the source is defundpolice.org, which is a collaboration with Movement for Black Lives, Critical Resistance, Interrupting Criminalization, Policy Link, Law for Black Lives, and a number of other related and allied organizations. So as you can see, Iowa City, which is the city represented on the left, has 85 officers, which are sworn personnel, and 23 civilian employees for a total of 108. And then they evaluate that on the basis of what that amounts to in terms of officers per 1,000 people in the community. So the Iowa City Police Department has 63% of the officers per capita as the state average. So that is it's hard for me to get the cursor over there. There it is, I think. So as you can see, Iowa City is about 63% of the state average. It is 47% of the national average, and it's 60% of the officers per capita as similar sized cities across the country. So to match state, national, and peer department sizes, Iowa City Police should have between 135 and 179 total officers. Now, again, this isn't explicitly about the race of those officers, the racial composition of the department of recruits or anything like that. But I thought it was an interesting statistic because there are certainly a lot of schools of thought about what the right number of police is in a particular place and when someone feels over-policed or under-policed. So I thought this was an important piece of data or set of data for you all to orient yourselves around. Then we go to funding. And again, this is not broken out in a racial way, but I thought it was also an important set of data for you all to consider. So this looks specifically at data from state and federal databases, public records requests to local police departments, and media reports. And it's compiled in something called the Police Scorecard, which is an independent 501c3 organization that is compiling this data and analyzing it. But as you can see, the actual data here comes from the federal government, partly supplied by the local agency. So what this is here to tell us is that of the funding for the Iowa City Police Department, there is more police funding in Iowa City per capita, which means per resident, than just about 10% of departments. And then if you look at the officers per 1,000 population that we were talking about a little earlier, there are more officers per population than only 11% of departments. So both of these come along to show you that in comparison to other departments, the ICPD is a little bit smaller. But again, that doesn't necessarily have anything directly to do with race or racial inequities or discrimination. It's just a data point. Here's where we get into some information that's broken out by race. As you can see on the table, what we've done is we've listed the number of arrests made by the race of the person arrested. And you'll notice that there's going to be a distinction between arrests and crimes, meaning an arrest is just that. It's a person being placed under arrest, but they could be released. They may never see the light of a courtroom. A crime is when they are formally charged and perhaps put on trial. So what you can see from this table is that over this period, and I know that it may seem like dated data, we do have more recent data for some of our other types of findings. But what you see here is that Black or African Americans are somewhat disproportionately represented in the number of arrests, as are American Indians or Alaska Natives. Asians are not, Native Hawaiians are not, and whites are arrested at approximately the same level as they are in the population according to the 2020 census. But of all of the arrests made during that 5-year period, 19% were listed as Black or African American, which is equivalent to, which is different than the proportion that they are of the population as a whole. And then I mentioned the distinction between arrests and crimes. This is data, again, from the federal government, but these are recorded offenses. This is where the police has said, we are charging you with a crime. And in this case, you can see it a little bit more starkly that of all of the offenses reported by ICPD to the federal government, 52% of them involved Black or African American offenders, if you will, which is in far excess of the percentage of population that they are. Now, again, it's important to decide what that means to you. It may mean nothing to you. It may be coincidental. It may not indicate anything that is truly amiss, or it may be a sign of something that is amiss. But those are the data that we found relative to the proportionality of who is being charged with crimes in this community by the local police department, and then a comparison to their percentage of the population.
Larry, can I ask a question?
Of course you may.
So I know this is race. Did you find anything on ethnicity for the Latino population?
You know, we haven't yet. We're still looking. It's interesting because there is a data set that lists every single incident. And if you look at the data, not one of the incidents is listed Hispanic or Latino. And we don't know what to make of that. Obviously, it's highly unlikely that none of them were committed by, I mean, it would be statistically almost impossible, but they are listed as either one of these or unknown or not specified. So we need to understand why that is. We don't know, but that's what the data set that we have showed us. So still to come, to be continued on that.
That makes me curious. How do they, because we do have people of Middle Eastern origin or Arab origin, how is it captured?
Well, it's captured by, we think, the arresting officers as they produce paperwork. I don't know if they ask the person to identify themselves by a particular race, or if they simply make a judgment based on, you know, surface appearances or something else. But as far as we know, it is completed by the arresting officer or officers involved in the incident.
Okay.
So there may be some faulty assumptions being made about someone's background. We don't know. And certainly, you know, there is not a distinction in the data that we can see between African American and African, for example, so, or nationality or anything of that sort. So that's of interest to us as well. So the interesting thing about this compilation of data, the scorecard, is that they, as you can see, sort of grade out different elements of a police department's performance as a percentile. So when it comes to these indicators that you see here on the screen, where it says excessive force complaints upheld. So this category captures, I'm reading here just so I'm fully accurate. This category captures what percentage of complaints were upheld when civilians alleged that police officers used excessive force. There were 28 complaints made over this 9-year period that was examined, of which 4% or 1 to 2 of them were ruled in favor of civilians. The measure of 4% listed refers only to the percentage upheld. Unlike the measure of force used per arrest, for example, the measure of excessive force complaints upheld doesn't compare ICPD to other police departments. When it comes to discrimination complaints upheld, it's the same thing. In this case, there were 10 complaints made over a 9-year period, of which none of them were ruled in favor of civilians. Now, these aren't the only kinds of complaints that people could make against officers. These are specific to excessive force and discrimination. And as you can see, when you look at misconduct complaints as a whole, a much larger percentage of them were upheld, which is of note if that's of interest. But it was interesting to us to see how low the rates were, both of the total number of complaints. I mean, that's not a large number of complaints when you think about a 9-year period for there only to have been 28, and also for so few of them to have been upheld, which means validated, verified, so forth. And as you know, here in the city, there are community members that are on the Community Police Review Board who evaluate those, as well as the chief and the administration. This is pertaining to the way in which the PD goes about its work, less from a matter of force and more from a matter of the kinds of arrests they make and the kind of work they do to solve the most heinous of crimes in terms of homicide. So this category at the top, where it says arrest rate for low-level offenses, examines how often perpetrators of low-level offenses were arrested for those crimes. And I'm sorry, I don't have right in front of me, I'll get it here in just a minute, the definition of low-level offenses, but it's probably what you would imagine in terms of misdemeanors and things of that nature. And the measure of 24% means that the ICPD arrested people at a higher rate for lower level offenses than 76% of departments, with about 18 or 19,000 arrests for low-level offenses out of 25,000 total arrests. So in other words, they're comparing the percentage of total arrests that were made by ICPD for low-level offenses and then comparing that to other departments. And sometimes the way that this works out is that, of course, if someone is arrested for a low-level offense and they're convicted, that can obviously jeopardize any number of different future prospects. And so some departments have chosen to make fewer arrests for some of those so-called low-level offenses. But in this case, this is what the data revealed. And then on racial disparities in drug arrests, this explores whether the perpetrators of low-level offenses are arrested at different rates depending on race and ethnicity. The measure of 15% listed for ICPD comes from the fact that Black people were 7.7 times more likely, and Latinx Hispanic people were 1.9 times more likely to be arrested for low-level nonviolent offenses than a white person. So again, 7.7 times more likely for a Black person to be arrested for low-level nonviolent offense, and 1.9 times more likely for Latinx and Hispanic. I'm sorry, I don't have the Native American or Asian American numbers handy.
Larry, can I ask this?
Absolutely.
Quick question. So the way you described that, I'm confused because it sounded like the 24% is good, not bad, and the 15% is bad, not good.
And I appreciate the question, and I'm chuckling only because I'm doing my best to characterize some of the judgments made by a researcher besides me. So I'm doing my best there. But I think what they are, in a sort of awkward way, Commissioner Tassinari, what they're trying to say is they believe that an arrest rate, they believe that if the percentage of arrests that are for low-level offenses are high, that is negative. And so they're assigning a lower score to that based on the fact that it is a higher percentage in Iowa City than it is in comparable departments. That's the top line. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, what they want to see is that, let's say there are 100 arrests. They would rather 90 of them be for, God forbid, homicide, armed robbery, and so forth, and 10 of them be for, let's say, drug use or something nonviolent. But they're saying that in Iowa City, when they looked at 25,000 arrests, a great many of them were for these so-called low-level offenses, and a much higher percentage than most of the rest of the departments that they examined. So that's what that top one means. And then the bottom one is a reflection of the fact that, again, like some of the other tables I was showing earlier, Black and Latina communities were being arrested in these drug circumstances at higher rates than whites by a significant margin. So they view that as problematic.
Right. I guess what I'm still struggling a little bit is that, especially for the top one, if you're in an area where there's only 2 homicides a year, it's got to turn out that way.
Right.
There's
no. And I, that's again why I want to make sure that this is continuously a conversation about interpretation and value judgment that you all place on it as compared to just taking at face value what someone else may have done. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Well, also I was wondering with the comparison, it's like, when you think about the low level offenses, arrest rate, and how many of the communities that were compared were college communities with, if you look at the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, whatever else, ones that are picked up, arrested, that kind of thing, or public intox and that kind of thing. So it's like, are they comparing an Iowa City type community, Big Ten college, what else, with other similar types of communities with that kind of college presence? And
I think that's a very reasonable question. And it would seem to me that they, in this case, are comparing them to all, which may be an unfair comparison. And so I can, in the next time we talk, try to parse the data a little bit more to say, like, let's look at, as you say, maybe Urbana-Champaign or State College or, the other Big Ten cities of similar size, or look at it on that basis. I think that's relevant. This is, I think, a particularly important couple of graphics, and I want to make sure you are tracking the fact that this comes from a study that is being commissioned by Iowa City and conducted independently, but it's being underwritten by ICPD. It's not from another source outside of this community. But again, this breaks down percentages of both stops and arrests by race. Now, one of the things that is important to consider is some of the stops that are made by police department are what they would consider to be non-discretionary. Now, what does that mean? Well, it certainly could mean different things to different people, but if I see someone driving a car at 90 miles an hour, you might say, well, I have the discretion to decide that I'm not going to focus on speeding cars this evening because I'm focused on something else. But obviously, in most cases, that is in violation of the law. But in the data that we reviewed, the vast majority of stops were classified as non-discretionary, as opposed to I had a choice about whether to stop someone that looked suspicious and I chose to or I chose not to. So we can share more of that with you later on. But this takes all of the stops in total. And obviously, arrests can also be to some degree discretionary, but the department, I think, would also say that in many cases, if they are witnessing someone in the commission of a crime or what they believe to be a crime, they don't have a choice. So here, as you can see again, the percentage of stops by race is somewhat in disproportion to the percentage of people in our community. Obviously, it's important to keep in mind that just because someone is stopped or arrested in this community, that doesn't mean they live here. So just because 18% of those stopped in Iowa City are Black and only 8.5% of the community identifies as Black, someone could be stopped in this community who doesn't live here, if that makes sense. And the same thing, of course, goes for arrests, but it's certainly noteworthy that 30% of those arrested are identified as Black, while 11% are identified as Hispanic. So this is, again, conducted as independent research, I believe, by someone at the University of Iowa at the behest of the Iowa City Police Department. And this data, I think, comes from 2019 and 2020, and it's in the process of being updated as we speak. Okay. Oh, and one other piece of data I would share, I was talking about non-discretionary offenses. So the percentages of non-discretionary offenses behind these stops and arrest numbers range from 91.6% for contact with Blacks to 100% for contacts with Native Americans. What does that mean? That means that of all of the stops made of a Black person, this data indicates that 91.6% of those were considered non-discretionary for one reason or another, while the contacts with Natives, which show as a very negligibly small number, were nevertheless considered all non-discretionary by their finding. This looks at police violence, and it does not break it down by race, but it shows that ICPD, according to this data set, used more force per arrest than 72% of departments. And so this refers to non-lethal tactics like a taser, chemical spray, a baton, a canine, a dog, a police dog. So 28%, that score listed for ICPD, means that the ICPD used more force per arrest than 72% of departments. On the other hand, there was only one documented killing by police within ICPD from 2013 to 2021. So that puts them, of course, at a higher end of a spectrum in terms of how infrequently that takes place. So greater instance of force according to this data, but much less frequent use of deadly force as they're defining it. And this just breaks it out a little bit further by type of force that is used. So you can see that chemical spray is a little bit more predominant, especially in some of the later years, as is the use of a taser. I know that this is a tremendous amount of information to throw at you, and I know that it may be hard for you to draw conclusions just based on hearing it now. But I want to encourage you, after I take some additional questions, if there are any, to take a moment to consider what this data tells you and what you still want to know about what's here, and then what else you want us to seek out, because it's only going to be fruitful for you to conduct this work if it's going to help with your charter of identifying instances of racial inequity or systemic racism or discrimination. And so we want to do our part to provide you with whatever data you need to come to those conclusions one way or the other. Commissioner?
Yes. So in this particular case, is it possible to drill down farther to look at the types of arrests? Like
where force was used?
Right.
Yeah, we can check. I don't recall whether we have a incident by incident finding with the offense listed, but I will certainly look, sir.
And then also 2 slides back, you mentioned the 90% for Black and 100% for Native. What's the data for Asian, Hispanic, and white?
I'll need to take my screen off display just so that I can cycle through and look for that. But I want to give you the definition that was given to us for non-discretionary offenses. These are offenses that, due to state law or departmental policy, leave officers with very little or no choice in deciding whether or not to make an arrest. Officers are in essence required to arrest and would in fact be subject to departmental discipline if they chose not to arrest. These types of charges include offenses like bench warrants, driving while barred, and operating while intoxicated. And analyses show that in the overwhelming majority of instances where an arrest was made, officers had little choice in the matter. That's aggregate. But then to your question, I'll just need to look at the data here in just a minute. Other questions?
I'm curious, what was like really difficult to find? What are you like still trying to find that you think is important? What what is out there, but what should be out there that you can't discover?
That's a terrific question, Chair. Just take the slides down here for just a moment. I think one of the things that will probably be harder for us to find are data related to just police civilian interactions that don't necessarily involve a formal documentation, if you will. In other words, an arrest, of course, is a very public, it's a very documented incident. A stop is different. A stop doesn't always, the data that I was sharing with you about stops, that's partly from researchers' direct observation. It's not, you don't have to necessarily as an officer say, well, I pulled over sorry to pick on you. I pulled over, so-and-so and nothing came of it, but she was African-American. I mean, there's very little reason I can see for someone to record that. So there's a whole universe of interaction that police officers have with the community that may not be as clearly documented as arrest and offense numbers. And so I think, one of the things that's of interest to me that I was told about here just earlier today is that the way we think about police officer action may be typically that someone calls, right, or flags an officer down. What I'm told, and I need to verify this information, is that something like 45% of the stops are actually initiated by officers. And so that's something I want to understand a little bit more. How many of those, if I were to just break out those where it's not a call, because if it's a call, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, someone is saying, I need police intervention here. But if it's a judgment call on the officer's part as to whether or not to get involved, what can we find about that subset, if you understand what I'm saying? So it's partly just understanding more about those informal interactions. And frankly, some of that may just come from truth telling. Some of that may just be a product of anecdotal, hey, I was stopped by an officer. Here's what my experience. It was good, bad, or indifferent. This happened more than once or whatever, as opposed to a data set. But I think it's important that we try to get as much information about who is getting stopped or interacted with without having initiated that and what that experience, resulted in as best we can.
Thank you. I had several other thoughts.
Sure.
I see that you've done it. It's been more of the last decade. I'd love to see more historical data, maybe
Beyond
sure. To look at that, and maybe so Iowa City has a history of like a growing population of BIPOC people here,
Yes.
and looking at that correlation. I know off the top of my head, I like to look at the Iowa City Community School District data to look at how the kids, the diversity of the kids on that, and maybe kind of correlate what that looks like alongside.
We can do our best with that. Yeah, I mean, the data does go back beyond what we've shown tonight. There was one other thing you just said that maybe. Oh, we were thinking we might be able to produce some sort of a heat map where the city of Iowa City. And then the darker the color or the redder or whatever, the more calls for service or the more responses, the more police activity.
That'd be awesome.
Yes. So that'll take some effort, but we'll see what we can develop.
And I know that we are an Iowa City Commission, but seeing other areas might be interesting too, our surrounding cities.
And I think what you're saying is like, what's the percentage in Coralville or North Liberty and so on? And I'll see what we can do on that. I think it's fairly possible. I mean, these are readily available by department of the things that I was showing you. It's just a matter of how further we can dig, but absolutely.
And then when you've been gathering information, since there have been instances in like trying to gather this data in this community before, what of this do you think is like new information?
That's a good question. I'm tempted to say that we may not have found a lot of brand new information yet, if I'm being honest. I was having another thought. Well, two things. One, Vice Chair Merritt and I were talking about data related to trainings that have been introduced within either the last few years or maybe over the last several that deal specifically with, racial diversity and more effective ways to interact with people of different races. That's data we haven't seen and may want to try to collect and display. I'm also interested in looking at not just the racial composition of a particular department, but something about the recruitment data, because obviously you could have dozens of people in a given year take a test or, apply, and then of course, a subset of that be selected, and how does that break down? So I guess I would say to your question that, maybe the only newish thing would be an updated version of the STOPS study for ICPD. But even that, again, that data that I showed you tonight is 2019, 2020. So I think we are partly dealing with the time lag that it takes for this data to become available and be reported, but we're also dealing with shortage of time, just to deliver for you all. So we're going to have to do some quick digging to get further. Of course.
I'm interested to know if you came across any information regarding like any sort of training for officers that deal with maybe bias, or really any sort of training, if there's any information out there on them.
So we haven't seen a data set, Commissioner, about that, but there certainly is information that we can glean about trainings that are taking place, whether it be in Iowa City or elsewhere. But to what Vice Chair Merritt was saying, I think I would like to bring back to you, some sort of comparison, like of all the departments in Iowa that we looked at, here are the numbers that we think do that sort of training or something equivalent. That's not an existing data set. We'd have to do that ourselves. So I would want to do that the next round.
I just wanted to add that I've provided you with an example of a city.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a city in Iowa that is already sorry?
No, you did actually. Yes, I'm sorry I didn't note that.
Oh, yeah, there's a city in Iowa that's already, I would say, way ahead of the curve in even probably the country. That is Sioux City, where work with the police force has been going on for a long time, and the relationship building is ongoing. Our particular organization, Great Plains Action Society, has actually provided decolonization trainings for some of the departments. And let's just say, like, when our Native community goes to protest or march, there's actually support from this police department. And I'm not saying they are perfect, they are far from perfect, but that there's been years and years of work that have been put in from the Native community. And it's a great example that I hope that we can follow, and I'm happy to get speakers from that community or representatives to come and talk about the kind of work that's being done there.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Luckily enough, one of our two of our Native partners are from there, and one of them, his father, Frank Lemire, Monape's father, was one of the people that did a lot of that work. And I'm pretty sure that Terrence has been involved in some way. But the work that's going on right now is being done by women in the community. And so I think that's pretty amazing too.
Agreed. Well, it's great to have that resource, and I think it would be useful to dive into that further the next time we talk about it. But I will do what we can on our end to collect some of that additional training data. Commissioner.
Yeah, I wonder if it's possible to dig deeper into the discretionary, non-discretionary stops, because that one seems to me to be really a troublesome area, because I think it's relatively easy for it to be, I don't know the word, played one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So you could either be the case that it's non-discretionary according to the book, or it's discretionary according to the book. But then there's also the culture of the police force deciding what's discretionary, not discretionary. And then there's also something that I experienced, which is really very trivial and silly, but it struck me rather hard, is being stopped once on a college campus by a local cop for rolling through a stop sign at 4:00 in the morning on my bicycle and was required to give my license. And I was like, this makes no sense. Why would and what he revealed to me was we were under some pressure to make sure we're being fair. So I had to stop you for my number to get. So that's not addressing the issue. right? That's a funny way to address the issue. That's like we can still consider to be as racist as we want, as long as we do a few of these other things. So I just think if it's possible to somehow talk with the, or not you can, but somehow get information from the, how are they dealing with this? How is it trickling down to the officer on the street?
Yes.
To make those decisions.
And just, I've heard it said many times, not just in policing, but in other spheres, culture eats policy for breakfast or lunch, whatever the meal, there is a need for understanding how something that maybe policy is translating into action. I do also think in what I'm hearing you say that there's something to evaluate in the, this whole notion of pretextual stops, this idea of broken taillights and things of that nature. There was policy, as I'm told, at the ICPD, essentially not to engage in that. And then there was state law that restricted what policies can be put in place to stop those stops from happening, if that makes sense. And so assessing that further at the local level is something I think we should do, and we'll try to do that.
I have so many thoughts, but the other thing, I know there's a lot of numbers and that's what it is when it's fact finding, but I also want to see a story, I guess, like kind of just told about how we got here. When I think of fact finding, like it is the data, but it's also like sometimes that data is anecdotal or.
And this is something that I've struggled with, Chair, because of course everyone knows that my colleagues at Think Piece are doing our truth telling, part of this work. And so bless you. Where that metaphorical line should be, where should our work as fact finding start and end, and where should theirs as truth telling start and end? And I would just say that my working assumption is for anecdotal to fall into truth telling and data to fall into fact finding, but that doesn't have to be the case. It's just the way that I've organized this work in my mind so as to not feel as if I'm taking on too much or trespassing into what others of our colleagues are working on. But it's tricky because we could certainly conduct interviews, for example, to get more facts about these interactions. So maybe that is fact finding. But is that also giving testimony? It's hard to parse that, I think.
I would like to, my point of view is that you can't do too much. So if there is overlap, I don't see a problem with that. That's just me. But again, if there is an article in the newspaper from like 2014 that has a quote from someone, that's a fact. Someone said that. So that's kind of.
I see what you're saying. So that helps me, because that to me is that's different than our going and asking people for their experiences. So I certainly think we could do some of additional of that. I think that makes sense. Commissioner.
I'm saying these things for discussion purposes. The data that we have shows me that there are some disparities that may exist. I don't have enough data to be able to say if they're based with it being in the system or if it's just primarily within the individual. And I don't have enough data that says that it's because of the individual, because of the culture that has been created. That's why Lewis was stopped, to create a perceived case of fairness. And, Lewis does look like he rides his bike pretty fast. So, there's a possibility.
Hair on fire and all that.
I've seen him a couple of times. So when he wants to move, I think he can move. But what I struggle, and I believe this is a very good case that we should carry through. So you provide this information to individuals. Individuals will then tell you about their story, about how they dealt with the police and the challenges that they've had with the police and some of the good stuff and some of the bad stuff. And this is just my kind of this hypothesis, or maybe it's just a rant. Then I believe that then we're going to find out that in some ways people are using their ability to have access to the community in ways that may not necessarily be favorable to certain cultures.
Can you explain that? I think I'm not understanding.
Well, again, you know, you know, a person from the city came to visit me on Tuesday, and she was stopped by the police. 10 miles over the speed limit. So she'll stop by the police. And, you know, she, you know, her feeling was like, you know, I would come all the way to North Liberty to get stopped by the police. Right. So I'm trying to think of it from a structural perspective is what is it that I would want to have done to be able to change the issue? If it is within the system, I can do things around policies. If it's within the culture, then I'm not quite sure what I can do around policies that's going to change the culture. I could then focus on the issue of changing the people. And so I'm thinking about us, and as we're having this conversation, I may be able to say the police do not treat me well. They're always watching me. They always follow my wife. I can say whatever I want, you know, let's just say I'm making up this stuff. I can say that. And I'm painful because, I want my wife to be safe. I don't want her, you know, to have a problem. And my important thing is she gets home, right? She tells her truth. I tell my truth. I share my truth, right? I then go to the place where I am given the chance to deal with my trauma in such a way that is healthier than more destructive. So I'm not going to break things. I'm going to, you know, cry, right? And someone's going to tell me it's fine. What you're going through is normal. Here's how, in essence, the way that we kind of cope with it. My question then gets into is that what is the solution for success there other than just, and we've talked a little bit about this, other than hearing their story, what is the solution for success? And the reason why I ask the question is once I go through this experience, I want to go to the city council and say, this is what I heard. And here's the solutions for what you should do to be able to resolve this issue. When we find that it is more in the people than it is in the system, what is the solution? What is the solutions for success that I'm willing or I'm able to share to solve the problem?
If I may, a couple of thoughts to consider here, because I've worked with other police departments recently that have thought about this. Well, first thing I want to tell you from a process perspective is how critically important I think it is for this commission to hear from officers and from the department about their work. It is next to impossible to judge anyone on the basis of data or on the basis of accounts just from people who have interacted with officers without talking to the officers or to the chief. Now, that may come in a public setting and it may not. You may have officers who only want to speak anonymously or in private. But in my opinion, it's important for you to understand, and it's not a defense of any behavior. It's simply a process matter for me in terms of trying to understand where they're coming from. I also think that some departments, when it comes to changes in culture, have looked at criteria for selecting officers, for hiring officers, and priority of those criteria. So is lived experience important? Is a certain level of education important? Is a certain kind of work experience important? What kind of tests are we doing for their, I don't want to say personality, of course, that's ridiculous, but I mean their mental fitness or what have you, their physical fitness. So there could be things on the recruitment and evaluation stage, if you will, of hiring officers and or training them that are worth your scrutinizing to understand not just policy in terms of what they're being told they must do, but culture in terms of from the moment that they see an advertisement or the moment they talk to a recruiter to the time that they onboard, what are the messages that they're receiving? Because I think departments are really scrutinizing that in this day and age. So I hope that's helpful in terms of other threads to consider. And again, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not intending to evaluate anyone's behavior here. I'm simply telling you from a process perspective, a TRC perspective, if you're evaluating public safety and law enforcement, it's helpful to hear from law enforcement.
So when he's talking about a process, he's saying make sure it's well-rounded and you're getting as much information in as you can for people. Culture is never set by the people that come in. Culture is set by the people who are already there. If you come into a culture and it is what it is, very rarely are you going to be able to change the culture without getting fired. It just doesn't happen that way. So the culture pretty much is set, and it's set over long periods of time, right? It is, that smell in that room that has just been there forever. And it doesn't matter how much you clean it. It's been there so long, it stays, right? Eventually you can get that lemony fresh smell, but eventually it fades away. You know what I'm saying? So I'm bringing this just more up and just as I start thinking through our process of when we pull these people together, they're going to be expecting something. They're going to expect people like us to be level-headed, but eventually the city is going to expect for people like us to provide recommendations. I want to just be careful about not putting ourselves in situations where we're in a trap, where there is no solution because of some of the challenges other than the things that have been traditionally done or said, which have traditionally never worked. And I do it more so of saying that we have to identify, kind of like a Supreme Court, we really have to identify whether this is something that we can handle or whether this is something that the Human Rights Commission can handle. Is this an individual-based situation, or is it a broader situation where you need a team that's specifically working on something related to police, some topic? And will we have also the courage to say, hey, this is important. This is not something that we're going to be able to help and solve.
Just want to note before Commissioner Tessner speaks that if you'd like to share anything at this stage, you're the only commissioner I haven't heard from. I normally don't put people on spots and you can step away from spot, but I just wanted to make sure you're heard if you'd like to be. Go ahead, Commissioner Tessner, if you want to.
So I'll just make a suggestion. It seems to me that the fact finding you've done gives us a broad brush 30,000-foot perspective on disparities that are important. And I wonder if what we can use those for, and maybe you can help to go back to what Chastity had mentioned with creating a story, framing those in a way that it provides us with the kinds of prompts or a set of prompts that we might use in the truth telling.
No, that would be great.
Right. So people are going to tell their stories however they want to tell them, but we can help. Just like in the previous circles, there were 2 or 3 things. It's focus on this, focus on. We can use that data to say, have you experienced this? What about this? I don't know exactly how to frame it, but I think your team would be able to put that together, and that would help, I think.
Well, certainly would be honored to help you with that. I would say it will be interesting to hear what Eduardo Gonzalez and his team say about the relative merit of those kinds of prompts as opposed to please come and talk, meaning more of an open mic. There are different schools of thought on that in the TRC world. I personally think that a combination is meaningful because some people will be too afraid of an open mic to just say, I'm going to just talk. And other people won't want to be hamstrung by, I must answer such and such questions. And so maybe something where you offer the questions, but they don't have to be answered in that fashion or something.
Right. And I just to follow up with that, that's exactly what happened in the circles. Okay. There was a prompt, but that was literally just the impetus to start.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were very narrow and some people were very broad, but it helped just to get something going.
No question. Commissioner.
I do a lot of listening. I like to listen because you learn a lot more when you listen to how people think and then you kind of assess it and then you add to it. That's the reason why I'm usually quiet. There's a lot to learn from a lot of different minds, and this reminds me of a conversation that we had the other day. Me and a friend over at the gym. About, I don't know if you've heard of the chimpanzees with the ladder, where they had it's an experiment where they had food on top of the ladder, and they had chimpanzees down
And it was about culture, because the chimpanzees, they had it so if somebody went up to the top of the ladder, they would electrocute all the rest of the chimpanzees or something along those lines like that. And eventually they started transferring one chimpanzee out and bringing new in, and new chimpanzees would follow. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Once they get to the top of the ladder, the other chimpanzees would beat up the one chimp that would go up to the very top of the ladder to go for the food that was up there. And over time, they didn't even know why they were beating up that one chimp. They had no idea. It was just whoever went up that ladder, it was just the thing to do. That's what we learned. That's how it is. In that conversation, we basically at the end came across like, you have to have sacrifices to a certain level and degree. It's going to be painful, but you have to have people who step in and basically say, we're going to have to take these hard blows, take these hard shots in order to make a true change. And it's difficult to get people to step up to do that. So when I hear what you're saying over there, changing the culture and how dangerous it could be, I get that. And I understand that. I'm thinking on how and what would be good solutions to help facilitate that change. That's all. I'm just trying to contemplate it. Like, how do we make the right moves? How do we set things up where there is no real sacrifice, but at the same time, we still get everybody to change that feeling around? You know what I mean? Or do you?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And I think that that was one of the challenges when we were talking about this whole issue around immunity and cops having a certain level of protection. Then we said, we're going to take away the protection. You're going to be just as much risk as everyone else, right? It was our way of kind of trying to even the playing field. And I think that's challenging. Normally, if you want to change a culture, you change it at the top. Mm-hmm. Traditionally, I think when you think about the police department, you think about the police department, but the police department is one department that's a part of the city. And I think the whole culture is primarily within the city, so you need and how the city the way the city is managed. We have one of our leaders, I won't mention his name, but he's been sending out emails, and he said, look, this is the way we pretty much have done budgeting forever. And we do budgeting in such a certain way that is not necessarily healthy for us overall as a community. We need to change the way we do budgeting because that becomes important. And I know it's going to be difficult to do, but if we don't do this now and change the way we do budgeting, then we're going to keep getting, in essence, what we need to get. We need to put the money where things are important, and then we can get more of the stuff that we need to get. And I remember, I had a conversation earlier this week, with one of the senior leaders, and I said, hey, housing is not really a problem. You just have to build more houses. But if the system doesn't allow you to build houses, that's a problem. But here's what's bigger. There's no way that you're taught how to be a developer. Oh, you can buy a house and you know how to renovate it, but no one teaches you how to build a house. Right. And so you can't solve the housing issue if you don't bring in brand new stock in the house. And so that my question to him was, well, how do you do it? Where do I go? I got an MBA from Iowa. They never taught me that in Iowa. Right. So where do I go? So, so I think just a part of it is what you're saying is, when you talk about doing things around culture, it's really about taking information that you really don't have, finding that information, and then trying to bring it into the system in ways that, in essence, can kind of create some disruption, and that's kind of what I think happens. I just want it so that I agree that there's a balance between it being structured and it being open in the conversation, because I believe, just like what you're saying, and just actually like what you're doing, is that when you start listening to people have these conversations, something that's going to click. And you're going to then go back to that person and start talking to them more about that one specific thing that that you can solve, or it's solvable. You don't know how it's solvable, or of the person that talked to you 3 years ago about something that could actually solve that problem. I think it's finding those nuggets and then being able to implement those nuggets of success, but also being able to say, this is beyond the scope of what we can do in essence to achieve success.
One quick point, and that is just to Commissioner Simmons, is that, sometimes budgets are the least attended to by the public, by the media, in terms of controversy, in terms of debate. There's nothing that is more explicit in terms of a statement about what matters to whoever the budget is than their budget. And so I think it's important for us to work to provide a more detailed breakdown of the way the money is being spent on this particular topic, so that, and perhaps some trends, to your point, over a substantial period of time, so that there can be some understanding of where money and mouths are being put at this point, and then whether that should shift in some way. You certainly have done what I've asked of you in terms of the items before us, and I want to respect how long we've been here, but I also want to see what else you'd like us to pursue between now and when we return, which is likely to be in middle March, right before the events.
Were you going to say something, Cliff?
You can go and I'll go after.
So I'm just thinking, we live in, some people say progressive Iowa City, a town that thinks they're progressive, but we're not as progressive. And some people might see some of the data that you pull and be like, well, that's not that bad. So I'm wondering what we can show data wise, what would happen if we don't make any changes, what that could look like. Does that make sense?
Is there a trend going?
Like what is our trend? Or like, yes, we may look better than this other city that people perceive as more racist, but that doesn't mean that there's not issues here.
Let me ask you first, just I do want to respond to your suggestion, but what does progressive mean to you?
And I said that as quotation marks.
What does progressive mean to you?
We live in a state that is not as progressive. I don't know how to answer that. More forward thinking, more willing to make change, more willing to look at diversity and try to adjust accordingly to make sure that there are equitable, I can't say the word, equitable things being implemented to help everyone.
Right.
Iowa City does do that more so than other places in the state, but we have a lot of work to do.
I guess what came to mind when I was listening to you is to challenge you as a group, and you don't have to do this now, to think about the ideal end state for this. Mm-hmm. So is it, I'm just, rightfully speculating, is it that no force is used by officers unless very few exceptions? And so that number that may be better in terms of other departments should yet be better in terms of absolute zero, like vision zero for car, crashes. Is it that, offender and stop data aligns with our proportions of census data, population numbers? I just think that you kind of have to begin with the end in mind in terms of that evaluation process. And if you can agree on what you ideally would like to see, then it's possible, I think, for us to say, well, here's the progress along that spectrum. Otherwise, it's really a comparative. There's comparisons for the size of police, for the budget, for the stops. I mean, it's all being done in a relative fashion. And so I think it's partly your challenge to say, well, not in Iowa City. In Iowa City, we want X standards, and then see how far we're doing on that.
Okay.
And that could be a recommendation as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Johnson, I think maybe you were going to speak, but
I'm kind of still thinking on.
Take your time.
Yeah.
The question on the floor is just what additional avenues of inquiry, what other parts of this topic do you want us to explore between now and when we return? Yes, ma'am.
I'm kind of wondering whether there is a way that, or maybe it's there in what you presented and I haven't seen it, as I always remind myself, the TRC came to Iowa City because of the protests that resulted from George Floyd's death. So a lot has been said by the Iowa City communities, and to if a fact find on public safety. So a lot was said, a lot was also said in the listening post. So when you went out there in the field to fact find, was that also what was being said, what has been said? Was it also captured?
No, and I think that was the point that was made by the chair earlier, that if we can find quotations, if we can find things that people are on the record as saying, that would be legitimate data. And I agree. We just haven't gone down that path yet.
And my other question is, since what I was seeing on we are talking about ICPD, and I know public safety in Iowa City also includes the U of I public safety and the sheriff's department, the Johnson County, because we are part of that. And maybe I've missed it, but if when you're in the field, if that wasn't looked into, if possible, I would want some of those facts found, because I'm thinking of, because I remember you also mentioned historical or how far back we're going. I'm thinking of 2008, when a young refugee, Deng, on Gilbert Street was shot by a 24-year-old sheriff. And in a month, that was in June, in a month, it was an open and shut case. And this is me just talking, I'm thinking, if that was today, that wouldn't have been the case. No. But this is just me and my own opinion and the other anecdotal information that I think you already said no. So
the information about Johnson County Sheriff is easy for us to access.
Yeah, so that's also something I would want, because we do interact with the sheriffs,
of course,
and a lot of the stories shared are not in opinions, and some people have also made complaints. So so that would be that data that I would be interested in.
Absolutely,
and the U of I
and I'm
safety.
I'm sure this would go without saying, but I'll just caveat that obviously Johnson County data will include incidents outside of the city limits. And so as long as you take that with a grain of salt, I don't know that I'll be able to parse and say, these are the Johnson County Sheriff's incidents inside Iowa City. It might just be an aggregate, but certainly we can have that information.
Yeah, and the other thing, I do know that I did notice the complaints from the Police Review Board. And I do remember somebody at one of the city councils, Iowa City Council meeting, somebody pointing out that a lot of the complaints brought before the board from people of color were not addressed. I wasn't paying attention and maybe didn't see that, but it would be something interesting to look at.
The complainant of colors, what you mean? In other words, the person filing the complaint?
Yeah, they filed complaints, but they're not addressed.
There are more data that we can bring you on civilian complaints, including qualitative data around notes made by the board. They may not uphold a complaint, but they may still say essentially we're not happy or not comfortable or whatever with this incident. So we should bring that to you, and we can try to find the information you referenced about any disparities on the race of complainant and the way it's handled.
Yeah, and you're talking about the contact with the police, the traffic stops. And sometimes other than that's kind of because it doesn't really, sometimes it, unless I'm an observer, but I'm thinking of some of the complaints that end up in court. Some of those information coming back here because some of those stops, people feel that this is racist and they take it to court, some of their traffic stops.
You mean as opposed to the civilian review board? Is that what you mean?
No, now I'm talking about now going to court.
Right.
Traffic stop.
But distinguishing, some people may take it to the community police review board and to court. I'll see what we can find on the, I'll see what I can find on the court side. Yes, ma'am.
So the two things. One is I just want to remind people about the whole story I told you about, going down rabbit holes. Be careful, you may find a rabbit. But the second thing is Chair Dillard, if maybe you can give us some guidance on, now that we have this bit of information, when within our current timeline do we use this to practice truth telling?
You mean next month during the events that we have planned for?
No, I'm not talking about in March. To me, March is when we're going to, we were supposed to gather the information, figure out how to put the quote unquote show on. And that's next. That happens in March, the show. I'm talking about where we start gathering the information, figuring out the type of people that would have this as an interest of sharing their story, and then identifying who has the better story to be able to present.
So you're talking about the truth telling side of things to like go alongside the fact finding. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what you're hearing is that we're talking about the concept of what the process is, right? So we're going to go and do some fact finding. Then we're going to link that into truth telling. And then we're going to link that into, how that links into healing circles if necessary. And then we're going to identify what story we wanted to tell. That's where we would come up with a story and say, this is the story we want to tell. And here are the people that are going to tell the story, just like the House of Representatives would then do. And then we get into, here are the ways of helping resolve some of those issues that we are trying to address.
If I may, Chair, Greensboro's TRC is helpful in this way because essentially, I think what Commissioner Simmons is talking about is there is truth telling that can happen in private prior to the events in March. There's testimony that you may want to collect, particularly from officers, but also from people with direct lived experience, negative, positive, and otherwise, with law enforcement. And what Greensboro did was they collected a lot of that testimony. And then just as Commissioner Simmons just said, they decided we want to hear these testimonies publicly. We want to talk about this aspect of the story on day one, this aspect on day two, this aspect on day three. So what that might look like is, again, each commissioner seeking out people's stories, hearing those stories, and then bringing it to the group to say, well, these are the stories that really resonated with me. I think we should ask them to speak about it publicly. And then you all would collectively decide whom to invite and how to structure it. That's a paradigm. It doesn't have to be the way that you do it. It can be more of an open call and, whoever comes and so on, or it could be both. But I do think there's a precedent for what I hear you describing. Oh,
I wanted to.
Oh, and my colleague is raising her hand, Melinda Salazar.
Before Melinda speaks, I wanted to just point out like that Greensboro suggestion is great, but we don't have the same. We are a governmental entity, which is different than Greensboro. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we would not be able to meet.
There's not a whole lot of, in my mind, and Melinda will speak to this, but that doesn't really change the extent to which you can invite people to participate. But
we have to if we want to bring all that testimony once it comes to the public is always public. They have
I see what you're saying.
Opportunity to have things in private. We wouldn't have that luxury as a group.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you can, I don't want to be the attorney in the room. There is an attorney in the room, but I mean, you're having a one-on-one conversation with someone doesn't make a public record per se. That's what I'm describing is you have a conversation with someone, they share something with you. And then if they want to put it on the record, they put it on the record.
I guess I'm talking about the notion of us discussing which ones that we want.
I understand. Yeah, you may want to do something where it's anonymized so that people wouldn't be, I hear what you're saying. Yeah. I'm sorry. Melinda Salazar.
Go ahead, Melinda. Thank you.
Hi guys, it's not Melinda. Sorry, I don't know what happened exactly, but I ended up sharing. Yes, I know. I ended up sharing Melinda's link. This is Eduardo.
Hi, Eduardo.
So, hi there. Just a couple of things about the very useful question posed by Commissioner Simmons. So yes, you're right. The key right now is to know how to link up what we are learning in terms of the data that we are accessing to and the experiences that people want to present. That is the linkage between fact-finding and truth-telling. Another question that is important and significant is how truth-telling, which is anecdotal in nature, which is based in memory, which is based in emotions, is going to be linked to healing, to the circles, to reconciliation. So these are the linkages we need to work on right now. According to the roadmap that we presented to you, I'm pretty sure a week or a couple of weeks ago, what we need to do is to present to you a proposal with the facilitators about how will the integrated final event look like. And hopefully in that proposal, we will aim at indicating how are those relationships, finding, truth-telling, reconciliation. And it will be for you to give us guidance on whether this is correct and this is how you want to do it. What I think is that one first relationship exists because there is a thematic alignment. The idea is that this first integrated event will be about what you are discussing now. That is, whether there is evidence and what the evidence says on the questions of safety, policing, rule of law, and race. So that's a first alignment, thematic. The other one is that we want testimony, information, experiences to go into the specific topics that we are looking at and that Larry has presented so ably. So questions such as form of treatment by police, discretionary power by police, whether police is acting in a manner that is disproportionate regarding racial communities, whether there is violence in the interventions by police, etc. Those are the questions we need to decide. I also want to say that I agree with Larry that the discussions on the truth-telling are not just to present testimony, but as the resolution says, to encourage dialogue, which means that it would be very useful for the Commission to locate persons who have had experiences in the relationship with police, but also members of the law enforcement community. For example, retired police officers who have experiences who want to share, and to invite discussion and conversation between those persons. I think that would be the most productive way to deal with this, and it would really inform the discussions in the community and the discussions in the Truth Commission, just like you are doing right now. Regarding how to invite and when to invite, I think that as soon as the Commission has a vision for that final integrated event, you should start doing outreach to community organizations, to social workers, to professional unions, etc., so that people can decide whether they want to participate and prepare testimony or present testimony. In principle, I think that is a bit better than just opening the doors and be completely spontaneous. Because if you're completely spontaneous, it's basically public comment section, which usually doesn't have any structure and doesn't help the discussion. The other thing is, if there are people who have information that is sensitive in nature, right? In that case, I am convinced, and I have said this before, when the bylaws of the commission were discussed, that Iowa legislation allows for public institutions such as the commission to decide that there are elements, areas that can be heard in a private or closed door session. So, for example, there may be issues that have to do with privileged relationships between defendant and legal counsel, issues that have to do with health conditions that belong to the realm of the relationship between the person and her doctor, and so on. So there are things that are protected by law, and that the commission simply can decide to hear in private. Now, but I do think that is really not the central question here, because what we are discussing is what needs to be public. And what needs to be public is discussion of this particular topic, informed by evidence and contrasted with personal experience. So that, I think, is the most probably constructive way to look at the task.
Thank you, Eduardo. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ngara. I've been arguing with myself about this question too. Is there a whistleblower? Is there any kind of, the reason why is because I know the likelihood of that is slim to none. If about whistleblowers, once you have a community of people that are working together, they usually have a tendency of looking out for each other all the time. Is there any kind of statistics on that, on who's whistleblowers in the department or anything like that, and how many times they might say there's these issues and they've seen it, they've felt it, and it might have been unnecessary, but things happen, but you don't want to say anything, but because I feel like that's going to be impossible. But
what I think we could collect, Commissioner, there are certainly instances, I don't know if it's true for this department or not, but an officer, her or himself, can file a complaint about an officer, not with the civilian PRB, but just up the command, I think. And I'm not sure all the ways that it's evaluated or arbitrated, but that I think we probably can document. We can't necessarily go to the place of knowing, well, I saw something I didn't like, but I didn't say anything. That would require a lot more interviewing and legwork. But the actual, creation of a complaint, we might be able to find that
between one time period to another, how much that's happened. And yeah, that's what I mean, because if we're thinking about the whole changing of the culture, it needs to be safe for people to feel comfortable and
understood,
absolutely stepping up and saying, you know what, that was disproportionate. But it goes back to the ladder. It's like, if you join in and you already see it's just going a certain way, you'll just kind of blend into it a bit more, rather than saying, you know what, I'm joining in, but I see this is wrong, and I'm going to say something about it. If we were to be able to kind of bring that out a little bit more, to find a way of making it more comfortable, I would say, but that is a very difficult task. I'm a Marine, and I know one thing as a Marine is we look out for each other no matter what. And I know every single police department is going to do the same thing, because when you risk your life with somebody, you go through different things with somebody, you're like, I'm not going to, even if he's doing the wrong thing, I'm not really thinking that twice about it. I'm not going to do that. I've seen corruption in multiple different places with that. And I think it's so ugly, but it is something that's where you get to, I think about the source, when you start getting to the root of things and start breaking up what the issue is at the root, it starts to solve a lot of other issues too. But I know that is also very difficult to do. That's why I've been sitting back and just like, where do you go with
that? No, it's a difficult question. We'll do our best to answer it with some data. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, granted, each community is probably different, but when I served on the Civil Service Commission for Coralville, like, that was supposed to be the department that if community wanted to have a complaint about an officer, that's where they were supposed to, and those meetings are minutes are public, there's a record, that kind of thing. Granted, in the 8 years that I was serving, we never had a complaint, but that doesn't mean that there were not complaints to be made, but none was formal. But that might be
The other sources of complaints to
exactly,
look at.
exactly.
So Eduardo, AKA Linda, this is what I heard you say. And please make all corrections to my statement. What I heard you say is that yes, there's something that we ultimately need to do is that we need to figure out the story, and we need to do that by soliciting the community to be involved and to be able to tell us these stories. And we need to do that in advance of what we're trying to do in March. That you're willing to give us some guidance, but we ultimately have to do that work in advance before our March event.
I think you are, if this is a question, yeah, I think that you are the persons with the legal mandate by the city to do that. I think that the facilitators can do all the legwork for that, but the actual call needs to be a call by the commission.
Has the MLK event been rescheduled yet? Okay.
Yeah, it's for February, December, February. Like the 29th or
I don't know the details. There's certain things that maybe replicate what would occur on MLK Day, but I'm not sure it is the itinerary that was set for the original date. Because as I understand it now, the reschedule is a dinner. So I am not quite sure it's the same structure.
I'm sorry, did you say a dinner? No breakfast, huh?
but it's the 23rd is what V just said.
That's the date. That's what that's all I know is the date and the location. The specifics I don't know enough about to speak on.
So there's like the platform that we had where there actually was talking posts. I can't remember whatever the term they used.
Listening post.
Okay, whatever. That so that platform, because that would have been the perfect thing if that could have been rescheduled. We have had a date, and then that could have been the event where we were doing what we're just talking about. But if the platform is totally different, then that kind of scratches that. But
so I want to ask you just a couple more questions. Is there a public relations or communications person a part of the city?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are they willing to work with us on the communications? Can they reach out to the radio stations and the TV stations? Can they help set up interviews? I mean, interviews with the newscasters. Can they get on up? They can allow us to get on the news and talk about this work.
Yes.
If the county can do it, the city should be able to do it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I don't think we can dictate, like there's always the public information spots that they have, which always show
at hours that are probably not what everyone's thinking. You have to pay for spots if you want to do like prime time. So that's why I was like, it depends.
How much you think it could possibly be?
That is a little bit out of my communications would know. We could find that out.
So you're saying like, so maybe it's different for a nonprofit. We go on the radio twice a month with KCJJ. You think that would cost because we're through the city?
I don't know. I guess I don't want to speak.
I did work for a radio station once, and public service announcements are often treated as free of charge if you can prove that they are public service announcements. That doesn't mean that they would determine this is one. Each station might look at that differently, but we certainly had plenty of unpaid announcements of this type on our station.
Public service amount, that sounds fantastic. That sounds like exactly what we are public service. That is exactly where we are. We are trying to help our public and service
press
them.
releases.
I think that is
So in essence, they can do a press release for us.
Oh, yeah.
They can also communicate to who the people to talk to on our commission and phone numbers and email addresses so they can get in contact with us. And then they can help us put together our messaging. Would that be accurate?
It's better than a billboard.
Okay. So we can communicate from a broader perspective, leveraging the system that we're part of, which is the city of Iowa City, to communicate to the community that we need their help when it comes to gathering certain bits of information. Okay, we're down with that?
Absolutely.
All right. I'm going to recommend that we work with an organization. We can work with as many as we want and as many as you all recommend, but I'm going to recommend we work with the NAACP specifically around their ability to do investigations. And the reason I'm going to recommend that we work with them, and we work with them, not they work for us or we work for them, is that we're able to gather information and then they're able to help us package the information in such a way that we can then protect people. It's not public record. It, in essence, is a part of their system. They can help us protect the people. But it could be any organization, right? That in essence, the work that's outside of us, we can work with them, but it's not us. So it's not creating a public record.
I like that idea. I just want to understand the logistics of it. Like what
logistics of it, the logistics of it we have just identified the hole in our process. We've planned a beautiful event in March and we have no way of being able to get there. That's what we've identified. We've identified that we're going to spend more time on healing circles and we don't need to. What we need to do is be able to put pieces together and then go from there, not continuously repeat.
But what I think Chair Diller is asking is if the NAACP or any organization were in the role that you're describing, I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is let's say I'm NAACP vice president. I go to talk to random citizen, Mr. Jones. He has something to share with me. He shares it with me. I document the conversation, but maybe I redact the personal information. And then I transmit that to the TRC for review. And if you all say, well, whoever this is, I want this person to talk publicly, they could do so. Am I tracking?
You're tracking.
So in other words, the partner organization would function like canvassers, field organizers, except that they wouldn't have to, that they could keep the information about who told them what so that they could have a contact, but they don't have to transmit it to you with the name on it in such a way that then that name is immediately publicized.
Yeah, I think I understand that. I know we've kind of talked about something like that a few times, just never decided how we're going to do it. And when I say logistics, I just want to, I guess, understand if we're like, this is essentially trusting another entity, whoever that could be, just what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to have a contract? Like, what does that mean for them to do that?
I think you're wanting to know the specifics. I think it makes a lot of sense. I can't share with you what the specifics are because I just kind of really thought of it.
And we don't have to decide it now. I just wanted to put that out there. We can decide it afterwards. Just want to, I think that question has to be asked if we're all on the same page.
I think it would be helpful to memorialize it in something like a memorandum of understanding, not a contract with money attached necessarily, but just here's what we're all agreeing to do. Commissioner, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an absolutely great idea. What I don't understand is why that precludes healing circles. I didn't understand
why that include who?
Why that precludes healing circles.
I don't think that does.
What I was just simply saying is that if we've gained all the knowledge we need from healing circles, we don't need to do more healing circles. We need to invest our time in making sure that the model works. So like we said, I think what I heard through the conversation is healing circles would have been really interesting if it was specifically targeted around a specific area. So if we did healing circles as a part of this process of gathering information, we did the fact finding,
right?
We then do the truth telling, and then the healing circles is linked to that. Then we can start seeing that everything starts to flow and it makes sense, and we better understand how it fits in.
Because right now for March, we have slots for truth telling, but we don't have what the truth is being told.
No, I understand. I just want to be sure that healing circles is still a part of this.
Oh yeah, I didn't think it wouldn't be.
I think that the concept of what we did this past weekend was due to what was missed in October. So we had to go through the quote unquote development so we could understand it, which we now have gone through.
Right.
So that was really phase one of Healing Circle's work.
Yep.
So I'm saying in phase two, let's put it in its place to see if it really works. And then, well, not see if it really works. I think it really works. I don't think that we have to see if it really works, but see how we want to leverage it, the strength of the tool with the people.
Right. No, I completely understand. One other quick, Larry, you asked us, I don't know if you said it exactly this way, but sort of what's the end game? Sort of how do we know we've succeeded, right? And that's obviously a really difficult question. But one thought that came to mind is that the data that you've collected, the way you frame it is relative to cities of comparable sizes, or it's relative to the national average. To go back to what Chastity was getting at earlier, what if we instead framed it relative to a progressive city, US, Canada, I don't care where, that by all metrics is doing it right? How does Iowa City compare to them? That'll give us, I think, a better sense of what success would look like.
Happy to help. All I need is some concrete definitions of how to filter those cities. You know, I can have my own predilections, tell you, oh, such and such state capital with a flagship university, or, oh, you know, but it needs to be in the eye of these beholders. You all need to tell me the peers that you'd like to evaluate in that way.
Right. But it might even be like you were suggesting earlier when you were framing the nature of the data, where it was coming from. If I'm just going to pick a random group, a Black Lives Matter national organization said, you know, Dimebox, Texas knows exactly what they're doing. You know, or it's Cambridge, Massachusetts, or it's Sioux City, Iowa, whichever one it is. That's what we use as a benchmark to be able to help us to operationalize what we mean by the quote progressive and what the end goal is.
We can certainly look at what each of these organizations have held up as models and look at it that way. Commissioner?
I was just thinking, what are our most progressive cities that we can brainstorm about to think? Which ones are? What would we, just like you're saying, what would we see as a progressive city in order to kind of sit us next to it and kind of measure it out? You have any thoughts on any?
I mean, it is also, I mean, part of my head goes to the stereotypes, right? So for me, it's like Portland, Oregon. Okay. But there's all sorts of things wrong with Portland, right? You know, but that's where I go sometimes. I think that Cambridge, Massachusetts, because I know it a little bit, is another one but those are just off the cuff ideas. I'd rather have an organization that has looked deeply into safety issues, policing issues, and goes, you know, this place really seems to have doing the right sorts of things.
There are certainly organizations we can turn to for that.
Yeah.
So we'll provide a larger than you need list, and then you can
kind of sort through and check out to see which cities are bringing everybody together.
In theory, yes, sir.
Not just one group to another, but literally everybody, and progressively the city is getting better. And in general, that's what I think the best measurement is right there.
Well, also, I mean, maybe people that you know who've been someplace that made a comment, you know, this actually was kind of cool.
This is nice. Yeah. Take bits and pieces from each one of these different cities to bring it right here to Iowa.
Somebody said they've been someplace. Oh, let's go check it out, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, and Dr. Skula, going back to some other area that, and again, maybe I didn't hear it. You talked about the police contact with community members. The majority of them were initiated by for example, the traffic stops were initiated by the police officers. I would be interested in getting facts on contacts that come about because a call was made to the police. And I would really be interested in the race of the caller and the race of the person being called on. So
who they're complaining about or concerned about.
Yeah, whom they are. That's something I'd be interested in because anecdotal evidence and from listenings, it's usually a white person calling on a person of color. And sometimes I'm thinking of a letter that was written sometime back by about a massage parlor, and the way it was written, it was in the school district to the police. The way it was written, it was the person was convinced that sex trafficking is going on there. Upon investigation, it didn't happen, and all of us would be able to give some examples like that. So I would be curious and I would be interested in facts in that area.
And I will note Commissioner
and,
Johnson's facial expression for the record. But yes, just to close that book, I'll do what I can to find that information. I don't know how much of it is recorded in terms of the race of the person who makes the call.
Yeah, and I'll respond to what Commissioner Lou, what you're saying about the end game and comparing with the maybe cities. I'm thinking of Endgame. For the TRC, I'm thinking of following the resolution that constituted the TRC and carrying out the 3 charges. So ending up with the recommendations to the city of Iowa City. And I've been thinking a comparison of success with other TRCs. Yeah.
That's worth considering as well.
Successful, also the most successful, highly populated African American cities, or that's one way of going about it. Because if you give opportunities and you give things the right way, you can kind of change the system. That's just off the top.
I appreciate it. Chair, I'm going to recommend that we table discussion for now with deepest thanks. This is the level of engagement you all have at the hour that we're having it after so much time is remarkable. So thank you very much.
So we'll table it, but were there some action steps or anything that we needed to talk about for the next meeting? Or
Laurel, who is listening remotely, is compiling all of the different requests that were made of us in terms of fact finding. We'll furnish that to you, and if there are corrections or amendments, we certainly will ask you for them. But you'll hear us present again most likely March 18th, March 14th virtually, and then March 18th in person.
Perfect. Thank you, Laurel. Okay, so if there's no other further discussion, I'm going to move on to.
So that was looked at around at the end of the agenda.
Oh yeah, I'm not done yet, but are you wanting to do public comment? Yeah. That's what I was just about to say. So I was going to open it up for public comment for this discussion. First, is there's anyone online, and then I'll turn it over to you, Amos, for 5 minutes. So if you want to come to the microphone, because I don't see anyone online that'd like to speak. Go ahead.
Well, okay.
You want to state your name and then tell us what you thought about this.
My name is Amos Kitchen, and thank you very much, Larry, for the information you've given us. And it's kind of opened up different areas that we're going to poke into a little bit. And so when you come to talk the last end of everything, usually most of your ideas are gone at the end, because we are all really good in here. We have been talking about these things for a long time. So I do not want to repeat most of the things that have been said here, but I want to point out something that is useful that can help us as we are going to be compiling the report or looking into additional information. So I see a problem area that has been mentioned, and that is on data systems at the police department. And we have a lot of holes there, limitations that has been pointed out. by most people. I have not seen any data on calls made by the community, like what Commissioner Wangoi was talking about. Those are not there. Also in the report, I saw that looks like the police department or somebody there chooses which ones to report and which ones not to report for convenience. I could see that in a lot of gaps. You want to, if you are able to report arrest for drugs and other things, but you don't report the rest of the people, or you don't report the areas where those things are happening. So that one is missing on that chart. And so information system is a big area I have a problem with. Yeah. I also have a problem with the studies they're conducting. There are two studies that you quoted here from Burnham and the University of Iowa Public Policy Center. They seem to be contradicting in a way, but I think that we can leave for another day. We don't have time for that. In these studies, usually one wonders who commissions them, who is sitting in the board, who decides which questions to be asked. For example, the pie chart you presented there is not telling us anything about some things, a lot of things. And right now, I think they're in the process of compiling their data. And later when the report comes, I might find, oh, they didn't do this, they didn't do this or this. This is because we have a problem of either the university or the scholars or the professors thinking that they know everything. Once it is commissioned, sorry, professor, I know you're a professor, sorry, all three professors, I'm not one. They always believe that they have the solutions to everything, and they even know what's bothering me. So at the end of the day, their reports are not helping us very much. They do the same thing over and over and over again. This is an area I would really want us to work on very seriously as the commissioners. Data systems, and who does the studies? Who sits in that board? Is there input from the community? My brother here might have an issue he wants to be put in a study. But when the study was being commissioned, nobody cared to talk to him about that. Nobody cared to talk about maybe his spouse or his children, impact studies. So that's an area I want to. The second area, apart from that, is compliance. This is compliance with the federal laws, regulations, things happening out there, and finally, compliance with the Police Commission Board. I think we have one in here that has been sitting for, I don't know since when. They have been making recommendations. We can look at the history. Is the board really helping us, or they're not effective? I think a lot of commissions have been there. If you go to the city, you will see a lot of recommendations put in there. We do not know whether those things are being followed or not, at what extent. That is how we judge our progress. It's like we have to evaluate what we are doing or what they're doing. The third area after compliance is on behavior. This is behavior of the system, of the police system, behavior of the community. Now, the other community, non-BIPOC community. This comes to the question the Commissioner Wangui talked about, the community seeing somebody that looks suspicious, they call on you. That is not on the police. I've been called on many times. I have a night business. I've been called on many times. It's not the problem of the police, but somebody somewhere thinks that. So you are not going to solve that by telling the police don't go there. No, they have to go. But maybe the neighbors are not well aware, they're not informed. They just have this bad idea that they need to be told that this is the data. These are the number of calls you made on this person at this place over this number of years. This is the number of calls you make on this kind of people. That information sits there. That needs to be pulled out. So we have behavior on the police, behavior on me, how I behave. Am I doing stupid stuff because I think I have to do it or not? So we have three areas of behavior: the police, me as an individual, and the larger community that we are working on. We need data on that, and if we don't need, then we have to recommend studies that look into stuff like that. The last area, number 4, maybe there are 5. Number 4 are data on impacts. You talked a lot of that, homicides, injuries. We need a lot of that. There was no data on mental health, things happening to children. How did maybe my interface with the police or somebody affect me, my life? I might be sitting here, walking here, but maybe I'm depressed. suffering from anxiety because of things that I go through, or maybe somebody that never goes through. We are not collecting those. I don't know who's supposed to do that. Maybe we leave them to the same professors again. But in this area, I recommend that a community like ours here need to have a community researcher. There are things that the people at the university don't do. They do the things they are interested in. Their intellectual curiosities are not always the same as our curiosities. They want to publish a journal, they want to publish an article. And they want to publish where money is. They're not going to do, like in here, do you see any local professor here working with us or helping us? None. But they're here because they're not getting paid. So impact studies, we have to say, how are we going to collect information in the future on impact studies? That's number 5. Number 6 is, this is about our interfacing, the commission. You guys, are you going to talk to the police commission? Do you want to hear from me? What questions do you have about some things? It's different when Larry talks to you. Larry doesn't live in this community. We are the ones who live in here. So those 6 areas or 5 areas are the things. But I have a lot of questions in the details, a little data in areas that I don't want to get into. So this is an area we will really need to dig and talk further. I don't know whether we'll get time. But at the moment, I believe that's how much I can help right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if there's no other public comment, I'm going to move to announcements from commissioners. Anyone? Go ahead.
I would like to apologize that I had to leave and at our last meeting, I tried to stay longer. I said 2 minutes, and then I have obligations that I had to go to. I just do. So my apologies. I didn't mean to disrupt the meeting or anything along those lines, but there's life outside of here for me, and that's just what it is. But once again, sorry about that. Other than that, at the end of this, at the end of this month, I'll be fighting in Vegas, representing Iowa City. So hopefully I'll do well. I'll do my best for that. But other than that, that's all I have for right now.
Awesome. Anyone else?
Those of you who will be at the
Can you talk in the mic?
Those of you who will be at the Black History Ball this Saturday, see you there.
Can you give more details about that? I forgot about it. Do you have any? If not, then maybe we can be sent out.
Yeah, it's already out there in our email, and I'm sure Stephanie's. I just know it's about 4 hours, and it's here, and I'm ready.
Anyone else? Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to our city staff for any announcements. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right. Thank you all.